Hey everyone, if you're enjoying my RM audiobooks, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that hype, and maybe check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel even more. Your support means a lot and helps me keep these coming. Now, sit back and enjoy the story.
The Sword Saint. Chapter 1. Author's Note. Info to consider before reading. Fate side. This is FateRoute Shirou. I chose Fate because it gives me the weakest Shirou of the three. He seems like the kind of character still in the beginning of his story. His ideals of heroism haven't been as challenged yet, so he is still a little naive in comparison to the other two. He doesn't have Archer's eons of experience in fighting and in using his magic, nor his arm to kill himself his way to strength. We will get to see him growing up in body, in spirit, and in strength. Saber left Avalon with Shirou before she disappeared. This story starts 3 months after the HGW. By the time Shirou gets to DanMachi, Ilia has already died because of her weak body. In those 3 months, Shirou trained under Rin and was working on shoring his bases. He has no idea that he has a reality marble, but knows that he can project any bladed weapon he has seen before. There won't be any other Fate characters other than Shirou. DanMachi side. Story takes place a year after most of the Astria Familia got killed. How Shirou got to another world won't really matter. The story starts with him there. I'm between 2 explanations, and by the time I need to explain it, I will have hopefully decided on one. Belle died at birth. Why? I dislike stories with both protagonists existing at the same time. There are some writers that did a terrific job in writing those kinds of stories, but I'm not confident enough that I could juggle both MCs like them. And it gives me the opportunity to change some events because of that death. The setting is AU-ish in more aspects than just Belle's death, both to cover my bases if I change stuff from canon without meaning to, and when I do mean to do some changes. I'm not going to spoil it here. You'll learn those differences with Shirou. Just one, i.e., how the authorities of Orario handled Ria's case. For convenience, for me, I changed how money works. In short, there will be 5 types of Valley coins. Iron, 1 Valley, copper, 10 Valley, silver, 1.000 Valley, gold, 100.000 Valley, and a rarer one for bigger transactions, mithril, 10.000.000 Valley. Some prices will change a little due to that, but it won't matter much in the grand scheme of things. Just changed it to make it easier for me to write. Shirou will join Astria's Familia. Story will start away from Orario, but we'll get there by chapter 7. I am cross-posting from another site and have a backlog of chapters. Probably will post one every week after the first 3. That's it, enjoy. I want to hear you say it. I turned back from the dark sun hovering in the sky to the figure of the woman I love. Saber, please fulfill your role. I say the words and my heart breaks, because I know that there is only one way this is going to end. The last mark disappears from my hand, and she steps forward. Golden light fills my sight, consuming the void, threatening to spill upon the world. A contract at an end. An oath fulfilled. In the end, there is one thing I must tell you. Determined green eyes, a voice that lights up the waning darkness. Shirou, I love you. I exhaled quietly and slowly started to raise my bow. Any brusque movements would alert my quarry at this distance. Steadying a Yumi bow while crouching in the grass wasn't the easiest thing, however. 2 of my praise brethren had detected me when I clumsily bumped the tall bough with the ground. In the end, to avoid scaring away any more prey, I settled for shooting from a half-crouch while holding the bow at an angle. At this point, I was seriously considering switching to a western bow, but I wasn't sure how much time it would take to get used to shooting using one. But that's for later. I closed my eyes, emptying my mind of useless thoughts. In what would be considered an insult to the 8 steps of Kyudo, I finished raising my angled bow, the same bow I'd used to shoot uselessly at Berserker all those months ago, and drew it until the fletching of the arrow was behind my ear. I inhaled, steadying my aim, and let go, knowing that I already hit my target. I exhaled, standing up straight and started walking up the grassy field to where my arrow had hit. I kept the grimace out of my face when I caught sight of its final twitch. It still wasn't easy to take a life, but I needed to eat. Hunger is the enemy. I muttered. Right, Saber? I sighed, letting my bow and arrow fade away into nothing more than a few blue magic particles, and picked up the dead hare, admiring for a second in spite of myself the accuracy of the shot. Straight to the eye. At least it didn't suffer. I muttered, trying to assuage my guilt. Mitsuzuri would cry if she ever found out I used her dear Kyudo to hunt a pretty rabbit. Despite how tough she wanted to be seen as, that girl sure loved cuddly things. I huffed a little when I remembered the strangled gasp she had let out when Shinji showed her that shocking video of a rabbit grazing peacefully before an arrow hit it. No one considered it funny, but Mitsuzuri? She was livid. Shinji was stuck cleaning the range after training for weeks. Yes, she would not approve of what I have just done. I shook my head, dismissing the memories of Fuyuki. I didn't have time to get lost in the past. Looking up at the sky, I realized that the sun was still high. The last few days it took me until late in the afternoon to catch something to eat. I'm getting better at this, I guess. Despite the situation I found myself into, I felt the inklings of pride for that. I had my dinner secured. Maybe I could hunt a little more and make some money? That nice old man in town told me I could sell him whatever I hunt when I first decided to do this. I could finally get a room in the inn, sleep on a bed. Nodding decisively, I stood up and continued my hunt. The old man inspected the hares I had spent the afternoon hunting with a critical eye. How about 100 for the 3, kid? My eyes narrowed and the not-so-nice after-all old man grinned unrepentantly. I was new around here, but I knew for a fact you can get enough meat for a meal for as little as 50 valley. For 3 adult hares? With their pelt intact, aside from the small entry wound of my arrow? Just because it was across a stall didn't make it any less of a robbery. 200. I know you can get at least 2 times that amount with these, old man. I haggled. I almost wanted to sigh at what my life had turned into. In any other situation, I wouldn't have fought his price, as money had never been a problem, but as they say, needs must. Come on, sonny. I gotta live too. I'll give you 15 copper, and that's just because I like you. Can't do more than that. I could have argued more, tell him I needed just a little more for a room, but I owed this man too much. Letting him make some profit off my effort was the least I could do to repay him. Still, I should have checked the inn prices before eating the 4th hare I caught. 200 valley a night, with dinner and breakfast included. With a 4th to sell, I could have negotiated for that amount. But well, no use complaining about spilled milk, or eaten hares in this case. Another night under the stars, I guess. It was with a little regret that I handed the hares over and got a little leather pouch in exchange. You're a good kid, keep up the hard work. Ah, and keep the pouch, you'll need it around here. So you can keep stealing from me, I'm sure. I replied with a sardonic smile. The booming laugh I got in return made my smile widen. He might be a miser when doing business, but he was a good man. When I first arrived here, it was this old man who explained what I needed to know of this world. The one who gave me some food until I could get enough of my bearings so I could hunt on my own. My arrival to this world had been a confusing mess, and this man here gave me a solid footing until I could stand by myself. Thanks, old man. I opened the little pouch, gave the shiny, literally shining, coins a quick count, and put the whole thing in my pocket. I'll see you tomorrow. I didn't bother checking if they were authentic or not. It was impossible to counterfeit Valley, after all. Ah, kid, you plan to camp outside? He asked and I nodded in answer. Be careful. There's been some folks that saw a couple of goblins here and there. I'll be careful, I assured him, wanting to shake my head at the ridiculousness of having to worry about goblins of all things. Was someone hurt? I've heard that goblins were amongst the weakest of monsters, but they were vicious little things. From this old man, no less. Maybe I could take care of them. How hard could fighting some goblins be, compared to what I've experienced in the Holy Grail War? Don't worry too much, they're goblins, said the old man dismissively. They always run away if they see more than one person. And the chief already called for a familia, just in case. They'll be here in a couple of days and they'll take care of it, but sleep lightly for a while until then. A familia? Huh. It would be my first time seeing one of those so-called adventurers. I wondered if they were coming from Orario. The past few days I've been thinking of my plans going forward, and realized that staying in this little town was not something I might want to do. Don't get me wrong, this town, Westmount, aptly named because the town's west side was to the base of a mountain, where all its mining activities occurred, was nice. But life here was slow. If I wanted to accomplish my objectives, then this town was not the best choice. So I've been considering at some point in the future heading to Orario and joining one of those familias. There were other options, but in the end Orario was my first for a couple of reasons. 1. Because I heard it was lucrative, and my new situation showed me the necessity of money too. Because if there was someone who would know a way home, it would be one of their patrons, and 3. This world needed saving, and I wouldn't be me if I didn't try to help. I left the old man's stall in a pensive mood. Maybe I could talk to this familia and ask some questions about the city. And about the gods. I'll keep an eye on where the goblins could be hiding. I could use that information to talk to the adventurers. And if the monsters get bold enough to attack someone, I could always kill them myself. I'm confident that I could take them down with my bow from afar if there were just a couple of them, and in the worst case, while it's been a few days since I last practiced my swordsmanship, I never stopped practicing what Saber taught me to defend myself in close quarters. But that's for tomorrow. I should hurry to the spot I've been using out of town and get started on a fire. Nights get cold here. Speaking of which, the hammer of a gun fired in my mind, and I couldn't help grimacing when it felt like fire was entering into my 27 magic circuits. And used as they were to magic energy, it was a miracle that they were in working order at all after the first time I fed them the pure mana in the air here. It was only those long nights in my shed recklessly, stupidly and outright suicidally. Tasaka's words, not mine. turning my nerves into magic circuits that left me with enough clarity of mind while feeling like I was burning alive to shut off the connection the first time I tried using my magecraft here. A few seconds more and my circuits might have been permanently damaged, at the very least. Or outright exploded if I'm being realistic. Which is why, every day before bed, I open all my circuits to this higher quality mana in the air. The quality of my magic circuits might not be able to change, but I could get used to the magic energy of this world. It took days of acclimating before I felt comfortable enough to enact mysteries. Now, instead of lava, it just felt like fire was coursing through my veins. Much more manageable. And that was just opening my circuits a smidgen, letting only the bare minimum of energy enter. I don't know if I would ever be able to comfortably use the mana here, not with my meager, low-quality circuits. On the bright side, just letting that bare minimum enter was enough to warm myself during the cold nights. It would have to do until I could get my hands on warmer clothes. I sighed. That's another investment I have to consider. According to the old man, winter was just around the corner, and I was woefully unprepared for it. And I don't think I will find a way to go back home in just a couple weeks. I don't even know how I got here, after all. Winter was going to be tough without a permanent roof over my head and having no more clothes than the ones I was wearing. I wonder if I could project enough fabric to make a cloak. Aside from magic being plentiful here, I noticed my projections were easier to make due to the high-quality mana of the air. Projections of normal fabric? Those were cheap, even back home. And my clothes have certainly seen better days. Wouldn't hurt to project a copy of them and change. I was approaching one of the town gates when I crossed paths with a hooded figure. I've been in this town for a little more than a week and saw a lot of travelers come and go, but something about this woman caught my attention. It wasn't her beauty, though I certainly noticed it when I looked at her. The soft features that peeked under her hood, chestnut brown hair that looked like it would feel like silk to the touch, her pure white skin bereft of any blemishes, to the point of looking almost ethereal. Beautiful came short as a word to describe her. And she looked clean. Not to say that the people I saw in this town were filthy or something like that, but even though she just came from the road, this woman looked pristine. Like not a single speck of dirt wanted to sully her body. It was like a god decided to forbid any impurity to touch this woman. Or maybe she herself decided that, if what truly caught my attention, what I felt from her, was correct. Divinity. I'd felt it before. In the aura of bloodlust and savagery of the ferocious Ku Chulin, mixed with the overpowering, unbridled fury and madness of Heracles. Faint, marred and sullied in Medusa, and corrupted by all the world's evils, yet no less grand for it, in Gilgamesh. Even the corrupted Grail had carried a speck of growing divinity in it. Yet, looking at this woman, this goddess, because she could not be anything else, I realized that what I felt from the strongest warriors and legends in history was lesser, diluted. When I heard that in this world gods walk the earth like normal people, I was worried. The stories of divinities back home are not exactly flattering to them. I relaxed a little when I was told they can't access their full power, their arcanum, while they were here. But that was wrong. If what I'm feeling from this goddess is true, then it's not that they can't access it. They can. They choose not to. And that's terrifying. Maybe most people can't sense it? This fathomless well of power in her slight frame. The man who told me about them talked about the gods like they were celebrities. Like some would speak of idols back in Japan. Oh, there was respect, adoration, but fear? Not a little bit. If they knew, people would fear them. I must have stood in place watching her for longer than a minute when I startled back to my senses. The curious thing was that she stood at the same place for that time, watching me back. I meant to start walking again, not wanting to offend the actual god in front of me with my gawking, when her voice stopped me from leaving. "Excuse me, young man?" she said, reaching for her hood and lowering it, and even that simple movement looked graceful. She looked at me with warm indigo blue eyes, filled with concern? Confusion? A mixture of both? "Yes, can I help you?" I said, after a second. The woman was shorter than me, but it seemed like her presence was enveloping the street. She seemed to ruminate on her words for a moment, opening and closing her mouth, like she swallowed the first sentence that wanted to come out, before she ended up approaching me with a soft smile. "I was wondering if you could help me find my way to a nice and I could spend the night in?" "Oh, is that it?" Maybe she was feeling ashamed of needing help. I tried to smile reassuringly at her, ignoring how the hairs of my arms were raising for standing so close to her. "Of course, I'm happy to help," I replied, and was rewarded by a bright smile of the beautiful goddess. "There's one quite close, actually. I don't have a problem escorting you there, goddess." I added the last word after a moment, just in case. I wasn't the sharpest tool sometimes, but disrespecting the powerful being in front of me. As much as Tosaka liked to say it, I was not suicidal. "Wonderful. You are my hero," she gushed, taking a step forward and hugging my arm with both of hers. "Oh my, so warm," she exclaimed as she started to pull me in the direction I knew the inn was. Soft, Even through the thick cloak she was wearing, I could feel the softness of her chest enveloping my arm. I was a little worried. I wasn't expecting to arrive so late to this town. I appreciate you escorting me. I stiffened a little at the close contact, and I could see her smile turning a little impish. And maybe you can accompany me for a drink and a talk as well? My treat, the goddess said, twirling a lock of her hair with a finger. Am I being picked up? Unbidden, tales of how the gods used mortals to sate their lust came to my mind, and I found myself a little flush. Am I in danger? Wait, didn't she need help finding the inn? How does she know in which direction we need to go, then? I floundered, trying to make sense of the situation, and the goddess must have found my nervousness amusing because her eyes were alight with mischief. Oh my hee, are you shy? She asked playfully, a giggle in her voice, seemingly taking delight in my embarrassment. Do not worry, you are quite safe with me. I'm not like Aphrodite. I just want to know more about you. And suddenly her eyes sharpened, the hold on my arm becoming a little more constricting. Like why you were trying to kill yourself in the middle of the street? What? So, introductions first. The goddess sitting across the table clapped her hands with a warm smile, none of the teasing from before present. Her soft expression and demeanor reminded me of a kindergarten teacher on her first day, if one ignored her beautiful dress. And I was trying to ignore her dress. There was nothing wrong with it, but that was a lot of cleavage. I had to keep my focus on her face and not let my eyes wander, lest I get reminded of where my thoughts had gone when she had grabbed my arm. Get your mind out of the gutter, me? This is a deity. I straightened on my seat and nodded. My mind had still been reeling when we entered the inn lounge, but I was finally getting my bearings back. The goddess in my arm had promptly deposited me on a small table in the corner, and had come a few minutes later with 2 mugs of frothy ale. Maybe you have not heard of me as I have been traveling around, looking for a place to settle and form a familia, but I am Astrea, goddess of justice and purity. My eyes widened at the effect her voice had. It was like a reverberation, a pulse of power, that coursed through the magic of the world. A declaration of truth that everyone, even the most agnostic, would accept. It was authority. This was a goddess, and the world acknowledged that. Oh, you felt that? She queried with a look filled with curiosity. Even those blessed take some time to feel the flow and ebb of magic. And you don't have a falna. A falna. A god's blessing. The reason most deities lowered themselves to this plane of existence, to give their blessing to mortals who would group on familias and brave the endless tide of monsters that come from the dungeon in the labyrinth city of Orario. The falna would strengthen them, make them faster, tougher, even give them magic. Strangely, the words level up and status were used like in those video games some classmates used to needle me to play. But still, goddess of justice, huh? I wonder if this was fate. My name is Amiya Shirou, and I'm a... For some reason, I was about to say magus, but years of hiding my magic reared their head at the last moment. I'm just a novice hunter, trying to earn enough to live after ending up far away from home. It's an honor, goddess Astrea. I settled for saying, wondering how foolish I was for hiding my status as a magic user when the goddess in front of me had just seen me react to her authority. She let out a disbelieving hum, while sipping from her ale, looking at me with narrowed eyes over the rim of her mug. Is that so? Just a hunter? She asked with an amused smile before turning serious. Then, I have to wonder, novice hunter Amiya Shirou, why were you recklessly channeling so much magic? And there it was, of course she would feel that. But, recklessly? Without a focus, without a chant. Do you know how close you were to causing an ignis fatuus? She scolded me in a worried and disappointed tone, like I was a particularly dim child that wanted to stick a fork in an electrical socket. More and more she fitted the image of a kindergarten teacher. I was actually expecting her to whip out the bad Shirou, to drive the point home. So, your answer? Astrea crossed her arms and asked with narrowed eyes. Ignis fatuus? I replied dumbly, that term having not come in my rushed culture lessons yet. Her eyes widened in disbelief, like she could not believe the stupid thing I had just said. Sorry? I'm new around here, and I'm not clear on all the terms yet. Her eyes kept looking at me disbelievingly. And I'm just a third-rate magus. I'm still learning about magic. I tried. Regardless of Tosaka's efforts, a couple of months was not enough to shore up my magic education, and that's just if this ignis fatuus was something I could have known before arriving to this world. The term wasn't familiar at all. I winced when I heard her mutter magus. Right, that's not a term from this world. Here magic users are called mages. Ignis fatuus, she started. The concern she had shown before didn't fade, but was overshadowed by some confused interest. Happens when a mage, I winced a bit more at her emphasis, loses control of the magic they are channeling to cast a spell, causing it to run wild and explode. I understood her concern then if I was doing the magic equivalent of walking with a can of gasoline in one hand and a lit match on the other. And now I know for certain what would have happened if I didn't rein in my magic on my first day here. I wonder how close I came to dying that day. How close I came to dying every time I turned on my circuit since. However, Astria nodded sternly. Yes, like I said, no chanting, no focus, and your body was suffused with mana to its limits. It's a miracle you did not hurt yourself, or worse. If you are truly a beginner, a third rate, then I must ask you for your own safety to refrain from casting magic so recklessly. It was a sensible warning, one that came out of a place of concern for my well-being. I felt really touched that this woman, this goddess, took time out of her day to approach what would have seemed to be a reckless idiot and just help. I gripped my still untouched mug of ale tightly. I didn't want to dismiss it. I wouldn't dismiss it. I would be even more careful going forward when practicing my mysteries. However, I smiled apologetically because my next words would sound like I was just ignoring her heartfelt warning. When my father first started teaching me magic, his first lesson was to be a magus, is to walk with death. The kind of magic my old man taught me was always dangerous. He didn't call it ignis fatuus, but he warned me of the dangers of uncontrolled spells. I fibbed just a little. I know that the supercharged mana here made my magecraft all the more dangerous, but I still distinctly remember how Kiritsugu reinforced a porcelain cup until it shattered into countless pieces. Do you understand, Shirou? If you are careless with your magecraft, this is the result. Now imagine the cup being your body. He might have been a lazy layabout when he was home, but the old man had been serious when he taught me. I assure you, I'll be more careful in the future, but my magic is what's helping me survive on my own here. I can't afford to give it up just because it's dangerous, even if it's a goddess asking. Astria closed her eyes and sighed, raising a hand to her temple, like my stubbornness had given her a headache. I heard her muttering under her breath, mortal children. So reckless. But I couldn't catch everything she said. If you are aware of the dangers, and yet still want to continue with it, then who am I to stop you? She asked before looking at me with a smile full of nostalgia. I almost forgot how stubborn you children can be, always fighting against adversity. Right, Elise? Her muttered words were not for me to hear, so I pretended I hadn't, but I could not ignore how her eyes misted in sorrow. She's lost someone, I realized. I felt a small tension fade from my shoulders. And then I felt a little bad for the apprehension I've been treating her with since I met her, just because she's a goddess. What reason do I have to fear her when she can show such humanity? I understood her, after all. I had loved and lost like her. Just a couple of years ago I lost Dad, and it hasn't even been half a year since I first met Saber. And Ilya, the big little sister I never got to know properly, gone just a month after the war. Loss isn't something foreign to me. If she had loved a mortal enough to grieve them, and I knew grief when I saw it, then she couldn't possibly be like the selfish gods I read about. If I could choose, then I'd prefer if it was a god like her I get a blessing from. But I started, shelving the thought before it started to take form. It was not the time for that. Astria's eyes returned to the present. Her sorrow didn't fully disappear, but it was carefully hidden away, leaving the barest of signs of its presence. My grin was a little sheepish when I continued. I really don't want to explode myself, so, any divine guidance to avoid that? Goddess Astria? By her knowing expression, my attempt at distraction might have been a little too obvious, but luckily, she just nodded and answered without any fuss. Well, I might have some if you would care to listen, Shirou. Astria spoke in a sing-song. Let me tell you about my Ryu and how she overcame her struggles with her magic. You see, Ryu is an elf, so she started, her face full of motherly pride. I felt a smile coming to my face and settled on my seat, enjoying the story of one of the members of the Astria familia. I took a sip of my ale. Sweet, but with a slight bitter undertone. Just like the feeling I got from hearing Astria talking about her familia. Astria regaled me with stories of the adventures of her cute Ryu, brave Elise, and noble Kaguya, amongst others. All in the name of helping me with my magic, of course, for over an hour before I realized how late it was. What can I say? The stories were a goldmine of experience that would make a world of difference if I decided to move to Orario. Astria had unknowingly answered a lot of the questions I had of the life of an adventurer, and of the dangers of such a life. I was not dense enough to miss the fact Astria had to correct herself to past tense multiple times when talking about her children. It seemed that a lot, if not most, of the members of her familia had passed away not too long ago. I decided not to mention any of that and just enjoy the stories as they came. Why bring down the mood when she seemed to be enjoying talking about them so much? During a little lull between stories, Astria finally seemed to realize how empty the room was. Most had already left for their rooms, and those remaining were just so deep in their cups that they looked ready to fall asleep on their tables. Oh my, it has gotten so late. Will I have time to check in, I wonder? She fretted, her cheeks a little more flushed and her voice airier. Considering how much she had to drink to wet her throat during her talking, even if she seemed to have a high alcohol tolerance, it was not a surprise she was drunk. I've had less than half of what she had, and I was feeling a little woozy and more than a little flushed. It didn't help that at some point Astria had moved her chair to sit next to me, not to the point of touching, but I was close enough that I could feel her warmth and smell a sweet fragrance coming from her. Still, sleeping outside of town in this state, considering the danger of goblins, was a little risky. Maybe I should just look for an empty alley? Is that against the law here? The cold air outside will surely clear my thoughts. The innkeeper's still there, so we can always ask. I said, pointing to a man at the counter/bar. By his yawning, I could guess he was about to retire himself. Right, let us go. We have kept the poor man up too much already. We stood up from our seats and Astria led the way with unsteady steps. I sighed. It seemed she was more intoxicated than I thought. Many nights of accompanying Fujine to her home after she had a little too much to drink resurfaced, and I instinctively offered her my arm. She hugged it with both her arms, letting out a pleased hum. My, what a gentleman you are, Shirou. I felt a shiver go down my back when she caressed my arm up and down. It's hard. I had to ruthlessly dismiss the thoughts her breathy mutter brought to my mind. She's drunk. She's talking about your arm. There's nothing remotely erotic about this. Not to mention that without her cloak, the only layer between my arm and the softness of her cleavage was the sleeve of my t-shirt. Think of Saber, Shirou. Artoria would be ashamed of your weak will. That's right. Focus on Saber. I need to remember her smile, her emerald green eyes, her chest, small but so soft, heaving as she pants with exertion, and the warmth of her body, feverish with heat after that's not helping at all. I shook my head, focusing back on my surroundings, ignoring Astria's warmth covering my arm. So, which room are you staying in, Shirou? Astria asked, settling her head on my shoulder. My right eye twitched. Breakfast here is delicious, and eating with good company would make it better. I could come wake you up. Actually I stilled, and the slight drunken haze in my mind was diminished a little along with the shameful feelings that kept bothering me. How? Do you know how the breakfast here tastes, Goddess Astria? Actually, now that I think about it, you were the one who led me here after you said you needed directions. Astria's cheeks gained a little more heat. It seems I've been found out. I was worried about you hurting yourself if I left you alone, and more than a little curious about what you were doing. I needed an excuse for you to accompany me, she said, hiding her face on my shoulder. I've actually stayed here before, just a few months ago. I felt my expression go flat. To think that the goddess of justice and purity could be so cunning. Or am I just a sucker for anyone who asks for help? No, it was the goddess' fault, I'm sure. After a few seconds of me staring at her in deadpan, she raised her face from its hiding place and, she winked at me, and a sigh exploded from me. I must be drunker than I thought. I could swear I saw a little star shooting from her eye. It didn't work. Elise used to do that every time she got in trouble, and it always worked on me. She muttered, a little confused. My eye twitched. Well, please don't bother yourself with silly things. You were about to tell me your room number. I'm actually not staying here. Astria tilted her head. If she had stayed in this small town already, she should know that this is the only inn here. I arrived in this town with only the clothes on my back, and I'm still not a good enough hunter to earn enough for a room. I'm just camping outside for now. Astria let out an unimpressed hum and went silent until we were at the counter. Well, that certainly won't do, she said and turned to the innkeeper. Good evening. I am terribly sorry about the time, but I need a room for me and for this young man. The what? The innkeeper, a thin 40-something-year-old man, smiled while adjusting his glasses and gave a short bow. Of course, goddess, it's always a pleasure to have a god stay at our inn. Is it 2 separate rooms, or will you and your companion stay in the same one? He asked, his cheeks gaining a slight flush when he saw how the beautiful goddess was all but hanging off my arm. Oh my. No, 2 separate ones, of course. We've just met, after all. Wait. I told you, I can't pay for a room yet, goddess. I whispered to her, urgently. HM? You do not need to pay for it, silly. I do have money, you know. That's even worse. You don't need to waste your money on me. I can just sleep outside. At this time of the year? With this kind of cold weather? When I can just pay for you? Boo, but I can't possibly dash. My words were stopped when she placed a finger on my lips. Just humor me, please. Take it as my appreciation for listening to me bragging about my children for more than an hour. She smiled sweetly, and my resistance began to crumble. Either I pay for your room, or I drag you to mine. The rooms in this inn only have 1 bed, you know? She joked, or that was what I wanted to believe, but her eyes looked serious. I looked at her for a moment, and she must have seen the moment I gave in because her smile widened. After a quick conversation with the innkeeper, I escorted Astria to her room on the 2nd floor of the inn. I'll pay you back." My words were filled with shame. In the end, Astria had ended up paying for the drinks we had and 2 rooms for 3 nights. "You do not need to," Astria said, her voice a little exasperated. She glanced at me, saw that I wouldn't budge and sighed. "I do. I'm not selfish enough to take advantage of your kindness, Aster, Goddess Astria. By the time you leave this town, I will have paid you every valley." So stubborn. I swear, you would have gotten along with Elise so well, if your hard-headedness says anything about you. She replied fondly. "And you would have gotten along with one of my friends, if only because she'd then have someone to complain with about me." Tosaka was always happy to point out my faults. To learn that a goddess agrees with her thoughts? She'd be elated. Astria giggled. "Oh, am I not the first to note the thickness of your head? And you likely won't be the last. I wouldn't be alive if not because of my stubbornness." It seems I got my work cut out for me," she muttered. "Well, thank you so much for escorting me, but this is my stop," Astria said, letting go of my arm and approaching the door of her room. "I will see you in the morning. And please, call me just Astria. Adding goddess every time must be a mouthful, right, Shirou? If that's what you want." Astria nodded. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Astria." That's better. Have a good night." She entered her room, but before she finished fully shutting the door, she stopped. "Ah, I know I said to the innkeeper we wouldn't share rooms, but if you have trouble sleeping, my door is open for you. I do not mind keeping you warm all night," Astria said as she was closing the door, sending me a smile through the gap that, with her flushed face and clouded gaze due to the alcohol, looked almost sultry, and I was left alone, frozen in place, processing her words. I sighed after a few seconds, having to force myself to continue to my room. I won't admit how much willpower it took me to walk the couple of steps to my room. I still have some pride. The room I finally entered was cozy. Considering the low price, I expected a little worse, but it was properly furnished. The bed looked comfortable and, more importantly, clean. There was a small table with 2 chairs to the side near a window, and a wooden wash basin full of water, a small piece of cloth, and a yellowish-white bar of soap on a little shelf beside it. I wanted nothing more than to throw myself on the bed, but I forced myself to go to the basin. I had spent so many days without a proper bath other than the occasional dip in the nearby river that if I dared to enter the bed like this, I'm sure the owner would have to burn the sheets. The water was cold, but that was what I needed to deal with these smoldering feelings left behind by the warmth of a goddess. I could feel a little clarity of mind returning, and with it came the shame. I couldn't believe how tempted I had been to accept her offer to share her bed. She's the goddess of purity. She couldn't possibly mean that. I reasoned with myself. She must be treating me like a child. It stung my pride a little, but with how old a god must be, a 17-year-old like me would be just a boy, not a man. I sighed. A couple of months without Saber and I couldn't help but lust after the first woman who was kind to me and showed me a little affection. Despicable. I finished my bath, and after drying myself in low spirits, I took the chance to give my clothes a proper rinsing, leaving them hanging near the closed window. I thought I would fall asleep instantly when I finally burrowed myself into the covers, but I kept turning and tossing, sleeping the farthest thing from my mind. The sultry smile of the goddess of justice and purity occupied my thoughts and kept me up for some time. Chapter 2. I woke up suddenly, a little disoriented, but more energized than I had felt in days. I took a second to remember the events of last night, letting myself fall back onto the soft mattress. Some of the bad mood from before falling asleep had faded during the night, leaving only a slight sense of shame of where my thoughts had gone last night. I sighed, not wanting to let my mood fall down again. I hadn't done anything to feel guilty about, right? Nothing happened last night. Only my thoughts getting away from me. I could still face her without shame. A knock came from the door, and I wondered if I had woken because someone was at the door and I just now realized. "Shirou, are you awake? It's time for breakfast." Astria's voice came from outside. "Right, time to face the music." "Ah yes, I'm coming, just a moment." I tore the covers from me and stood up in a hurry, not wanting to let her wait for too long outside, and I'm naked. Perfect, right? I washed my clothes before falling asleep. "Just need to get dressed," I exclaimed, panicking just a little. I think I heard Astria softly say something like, "Right, of course," but I was too busy putting on my slightly damp clothes to really pay attention. I put on my clean t-shirt, and the smell of soap made me realize how much my smell had impregnated my clothes during the last few days. I really needed to get more changes of clothes soon, even if I had to project them. But that's enough stalling. Astria was waiting. I took a breath in front of the door and opened it. Soft chestnut brown hair, milky white skin, indigo blue eyes. "Good morning, Astria." I greeted the goddess standing in front of my door, pristine as the first time I met her. "Good morning, Shirou." She smiled back, if a little muted compared to last night, her eyes looking downward. "I hope you had a restful night." Did something happen to her? I wondered. "I did, thanks to you." I'll never take a bed for granted again. I joked lightly, and she only smiled awkwardly. I thought I would be the one feeling awkward, but it was Astria instead who had difficulty meeting my eyes. We stood like that for a second and I grimaced, wondering if I had done something wrong. Maybe she had noticed my less than pure thoughts about her. I decided to bite the bullet and just ask, "Is everything okay?" "You, seem down." Astria sighed, closing her eyes. Then she shook her head. "No, I guess it's not." She seemed to take some strength from the admission and finally met my eyes properly. "But it is also not your fault." "I'm being rude." I started to talk, but she raised her hand, making me stop. "I wish to apologize for my behavior last night," Astria said, her cheeks going a little red. I admit that I like to tease reactions out of people I'm close with. Her lips twitched into an embarrassed smile before she grimaced. "But considering I just met you, even if you reminded me so much of Elise, I feel my actions last night were extremely improper." She grasped her hands in front of her chest, fidgeting with her fingers, and I felt a weight fall from my shoulders. For some reason, the fact that Astria was feeling uncomfortable about last night, that I wasn't the only one, was a little relieving to me. What was the phrase? "A burden shared is a burden halved?" I smiled, letting some of my relief shine through. "You don't need to apologize for anything." I admit, it was a little embarrassing, but hearing you now, if anything, I feel flattered that I reminded you so much of her, if even half of what you told me about Elise was true. Then, almost without my say-so, I felt my mouth twist into an amused smirk. "Just be more careful about your drinking in the future." I never expected the goddess of purity to be so forward. "Mao, don't tease me. You make it sound like I am an indecent woman," she complained, amused despite herself. A relieved smile bloomed on her face. "So, are we okay? I would hate it if you had gotten the worst impression of me." I nodded. "Don't worry, I don't think I made the best first impression either." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," she murmured and linked my right arm with her left. Compared to the affectionate hugs from yesterday, it was tame, but I still felt a pleasant shiver go down my back. Her eyes twinkled mischievously. "But if you want to try again, how about we talk over breakfast? I spoke so much yesterday, but you told me hardly anything about yourself." A sigh escaped me, followed by a resigned smile. Wouldn't be the first time a mortal follows the whims of a god for their amusement. Although I don't think I will find myself complaining about this particular goddess anytime soon. All right. I don't think my stories can compare to your children's, but I'll do my best to entertain you." It's the least I could do. She paid for my room, after all. When I set out on my hunting trip this morning after having breakfast with Astria, I expected it to go, if not better, then at least as well as yesterday's had gone. With a belly full of warm food and having had the best sleep in days, I had high expectations. When the midday sun started to hit my back and the only thing I had to show after spending hours in this grassy hill was just frustration, I began to think that paying my debt to Astria might be a little harder than I expected. Hours and I haven't caught anything. No, it was worse than that. I haven't even seen any animals to catch. If it was a lack of skill on my part, I could understand. It would be frustrating, but there wouldn't be anyone else to blame but me. But the fact that I could not see nor hear any hint of the hares, wild dogs, coyotes, or wild pigs I had seen every day the last week I started frequenting the fields was vexing. Granted, the nearby town meant that most wild animals only risked the fields when there was a lack of food in the nearby forest, but I always at least saw a few grazing. Something was wrong. And then there was that smell coming from said nearby forest. It was faint enough that I hadn't felt it until I got closer to it, but I could feel my skin crawl when I finally noticed it. The smell of decay, of an animal left to rot under the sun. Or more than one. Actually, if I could smell it from so far away, the nauseatingly sweet odor seemed to permeate the forest itself. I approached the trees cautiously, my bow and arrow ready when another scent caught my attention. The heady metallic scent of iron. I grimaced. Not iron. Blood. And unlike the other putrid smell, it was close. If there was trouble, it wasn't far away. The hammer of a gun struck down and mana rushed into the 6 circuits I opened, where it was processed for my use. Trace on. Aside from the improvement on quality and performance, the best thing about my natural circuits in comparison to my fake ones was the fact that I could cast spells in parallel thanks to their quantity. I was nowhere near close to being able to use all 27 in tandem, but 6 of them? That, I could manage. Judging the concept of creation. Like one would put bullets in a revolver chamber. I prepared my projections, going through the steps for the spell in just a few seconds. Hypothesizing the basic structure. Considering the volatility of the mana in the air, projecting something other than mundane weapons would be risky, to say the least. Duplicating the composition material. 4 of the circuits got loaded with blueprints of arrows. Of an arrow, to be exact, copied from one of the town guards. Imitating the skill of its making. Ashwood shafts and broadhead. Wrought iron points made by the novice blacksmith in town. It was the same one that I was holding in my left hand, the one arrow I used to hunt, sympathizing with the experience of its growth. Its history wasn't noteworthy. It hadn't been shot once before I copied it. I just chose it because it flew the best out of the multiple I remembered. The history of the sword I loaded in the 5th circuit, however, reproducing the accumulated years. I could do worse than Sir Kay's steel longsword, even if it was the one he used when he was 14. The sword-style saber had started to teach me was similar to the one her adopted brother had used, at least in the basics, and Sir Kay had used this blade when he was of similar height to me, so this sword was pretty much perfect for me. The hours of practice he had put on this sword had served me well whenever I needed pointers during the times I trained on my own after saber left, and they may very well save me if I were to be overwhelmed later. Excelling every manufacturing process. That would be the last step of my spell, the one that would create the copy for my magic, so I held it off for now, like keeping my finger on the trigger, if I wanted to continue the gun analogy. I still didn't know if I would need to defend myself yet, but it wasn't wrong to be prepared, just in case. Only one more. I placed a hand on my chest and closed my eyes. Reinforcement. The last and final magic circuit was used to apply the magical energy to my t-shirt using reinforcement to fill the gaps in its molecular structure, making it stronger. It would take only as much as something made of hardened leather before it was penetrated, but it would help. I opened my eyes, seeing the bright green circuitry-like lines covering the white and blue t-shirt. It wasn't subtle at all, though. Ready as I could be, I followed the smell, entering the forest proper and walking for a few meters before I found the source. Shit. It was an old dog, black and brown coat with speckles of white showing its age, a blue handkerchief tied around its neck. It was wounded to the side, leaving a trail of blood as it struggled to keep walking deeper into the foreboding forest. But, while heartrending, it wasn't the sight of the wounded animal that caused my reaction. It was the wicker basket discarded on the grass a short distance ahead of the dog, its contents, herbs and mushrooms, spilled without care. Someone had been here. I rushed forward to the whimpering dog, who let out a startled yelp when it saw me before its whimpering intensified. It tried to give another step, but it finally lost strength. It fell to its side, its chest rising and falling rapidly, a bloody puddle forming around it. I kneeled beside it, gritting my teeth in indecision. There had been a person with this dog, and they may need my help, but that would mean leaving this poor animal to its fate. No. Fuck you, let go. My dilemma got more urgent, however, when a distant voice reached me. A girl screaming, anger, desperation, and pain in her voice. It was coming from the same direction the dog was trying to go. A whimper made my eyes look down, where they met the desperate eyes of the animal. For some reason, I understood it. He had struggled so much because of this girl, and now he wanted me to go save her, to leave him to die and rescue this girl. I closed my eyes for a second, damning my lack of healing mysteries. Dad had told me this before. Sometimes, saving someone means not saving someone else. I hated it, even if the one I could not save was a dog, but I had to choose, or the choice would be made for me. I stood up and ran, my will made up. I knew that the dog had moments left to live, and I didn't have any confidence in treating his wounds in time for him to survive. Even if I remained here, the only thing I would accomplish would be extending his suffering. The girl, however, I still could save. I dashed through the forest, the screams guiding my way, cursing every time I had to dart around a tree and duck under branches. Every second I got delayed, the voice became more desperate. Help. Someone. Jonas. Jonas. I broke into the clearing just as the girl screamed the last word. Did she call for a sibling? A lover? Didn't matter. The thoughts just passed through my mind without processing. I skidded to a stop and took a second to inspect the scene, the bow in my hand rising as I did so. On the other side of the clearing, a young woman was on her back, struggling to get away from a small green creature that stood in front of her, holding a bloody crude stone spear in one hand. The creature's back was to me, covering most of the woman from my sight. Only her bright red hair was distinguishable. Goblins are cowardly, weak monsters, sunny, but they are vicious. People often underestimate them and end up as their food. If they find you alone, make no mistake, they would try their best to chase you down and have you for dinner. I felt my blood go cold when I remembered the warning from the old man back in town, and my body moved on its own. I inhaled while knocking the arrow on my hand and aimed at the monster's back. I felt the arrow's fletching tickle my ear when the goblin seemed to react to the sounds of my entrance and began to turn around. It was too late, though. The arrow parted the wind and, with a meaty thump, it was buried deeply into the goblin's back, just where the heart would be in a human dash, making it stumble forward. Ki-ai. The green creature let out a pained wail. In its desperation, it let go of the spear and the scrap of cloth and tried unsuccessfully to reach to its back to tear the arrow away. Meanwhile, I reached into my circuits and completed one of my spells. In a flash of light, a new arrow appeared in my hand, and I wasted no time in knocking it again. The goblin seemed to realize the futility of its actions and turned around with a snarl, almost stumbling down with its movement. It was strange. The creature looked unhealthily thin, but it was tough. Any human would have died already, but it held on, if barely. I could see its body was failing it already. I guessed that if I waited a few moments more, it would just fall to the ground and bleed to death, just like the dog it had most likely attacked. The last moments of its life would be suffering, and it would deserve that, most likely. I sighed and let go of the bowstring, letting the arrow fly until it hit the goblin on the eye, penetrating deeply into its brain. Instant death. It felt easier than killing hares, at least. The goblin fell forward, finally letting me see the young woman I came to save. "Are you okay, miss?" A pretty, freckled face marred by scratches and dirt. Her long red hair had been gathered in a braid, but it seemed to have come undone in her struggles, letting some of her wavy locks free. I approached her slowly, focusing my sight on her light green eyes, making sure to not look down to her chest. The front of her dress seemed to have torn during the chase, and most of her chest was left exposed. For a second, the girl laid frozen on her back, only propped by her elbows before letting out a relieved sigh and letting herself fall to the ground. Yeah, I'm fine, I think." "Holy fuck, that was close." I looked away from her, trying to see if there were more goblins around, and not because I wanted to be distracted from the way her chest moved when she laid down. I'm never ignoring my brother's warnings again. "Just a couple herbs. Nothing's gonna happen. Jonas with me." "Fuck me," she grumbled, chuckling self-deprecatingly. I was about to ask about this Jonas. Maybe it was the dog's name, when rustling from the bushes behind me put me on full alert. I traced another arrow, ignoring the girl's "what the fuck," and readied it on my bow. "Get ready to run. There might be more coming." I rushed forward to her side, stepping over the dead goblin, and looked to the direction I had come from. I grimaced. That's the direction to the town. So maybe that's the sound of guards coming, but if not, our path back will be blocked. As soon as I thought that, 3 other goblins entered the clearing, and the girl let out another curse. I clicked my tongue. 2 of the goblins were similar to the one I had already killed. Swarthy green skin, long noses, short stature. Hell, one was even shorter, and the same sickly thinness. The third looked different, however. Its skin was darker, to the point of being almost brown. It was taller than its brethren by more than a foot, and it looked well-fed, its muscles rippling with strength. The 3 of them were snarling, almost foaming from the mouth, and they were armed. The smaller one had a short bow, the other had a small knife made out of a boar's tusk and a leather buckler, and the brown one was brandishing an old rusted iron spear. "H!" the freckled girl exclaimed when she tried to get up, only to stumble back down. "Fuck. My ankle. I can't walk. Damn it." I cursed. Sending the girl deeper into the forest wouldn't have been a good plan, but it would have been better than her being in the middle of a fight. If her running wasn't an option, then I would have to fight while protecting her. "Stay down, then. I won't let them touch you." "What? Are you crazy? You're going to get killed. Just go, idiot," the girl exclaimed, and I had to keep the smile out of my face. Even if it meant being left behind, she wanted me to go. If she was willing to sacrifice herself like that, then how could I not do the same? "Don't worry. I'll protect you," I declared, my eyes focused on my enemies. "Kh. Gah." The bigger goblin screamed and pointed its spear at me, the others joining it a second later. Was it trying to be intimidating? I pulled on my bowstring, not affected at all by the goblin's war cry. "After I survived Berserker's wrath, do you think you can scare me?" I held my breath, steadying my aim, and considered for a moment. Long range first, then the others. I aimed at the bow goblin, ignoring the other 2 rushing to me, their weapons aloft. The smaller goblin took out a bone arrow, but before he could even come close to readying it, I had already let go of my string. Thump! My arrow pierced its brain before the other 2 even cleared half the distance between us. I didn't even try shooting the chest this time. If they were as hardy as the previous one, then they would have survived such an attack. In a flash of light, another arrow appeared in my hand, and it was promptly knocked. Of the 2 left, the dagger goblin was faster, its smaller size and lighter weight letting it rush ahead of its companion. So I aimed at it. My arrow whistled through the air, eating the distance between the 2 of us in a moment. Surprisingly, the goblin managed to react on time, lifting its buckler to its face the instant before my arrow struck. My eyes widened a smidgen. It didn't matter. Another arrow appeared amongst motes of mystical light. It would be the last I could project instantly. For the next I would need a second or 2 to get the spell ready again. Luckily, I wouldn't need another. I had another card I could use. Knock, draw, shoot. The movements I had practiced so much in the range were done in a moment, unaffected neither by the adrenaline coursing through my veins, nor the worry of the girl I was protecting plaguing my thoughts. The arrow flew true, and, while the goblin was protecting its face, its chest was open. Thump! The dagger goblin stumbled, wailing in pain, but it didn't fall. I had no time to curse their hardiness before the bigger goblin was almost upon me. Fast. Damn it. The moment my arrow had struck its fellow, the spear goblin had sped up. Was it using the other one as bait? I had less than a moment before the goblin was in range for attacking me, but I tried not to panic. I could project Sir Kay's sword, but my footing was not good enough to defend myself now. The goblin would overwhelm me before I could stand properly. I needed some distance. My bow was useless. I couldn't trace arrows with such little time dash, so I winded my arm back and chucked it. The brown goblin let out a surprised squawk when my bow hit it between the eyes, disorienting it, and I took merciless advantage of that distraction by taking a step forward and front kicking it on the chest with my full strength. It was bigger than its fellows, and it looked stronger, but it still had the height of a child. The brown goblin went flying a couple of meters back, screaming in anger. I let out a breath, relishing the moment of respite for what it was, before I settled into the stance Saber had taught me all those months ago, and that I had polished since. I turned to the side, keeping my back straight, but lowering my knees a little and spreading my feet shoulder-width. My right arm, bent at the elbow, crossed over my waist, my right hand lining up with my left. They were both still empty, though, so it looked like I was holding an invisible weapon. A memory tickled my brain and my lips curved into a small smile. Your noble phantasm, is it a sword? Who knows? It might be a battle axe, or it might be a spear. It might even be a bow lancer. My small moment of reminiscing was enough for the dagger goblin to gather its strength for a last attack. Its chest was covered in blood. My arrow still stabbed deeply in it, and it looked ready to keel over, but the sight of my unarmed self seemed to give it confidence. It rushed forward with a desperate war cry, its dagger raised over its head, but it would never get near enough to attack me. My weapon had a longer reach, after all. The moment just before it entered my range, the space between my hands glowed and I moved. I held the leather grip that appeared in my hands and my arms moved across my body, my waist twisting accompanying the movement. The goblin didn't even get to react before over a meter of steel caught it by the waist and cut diagonally across its body, almost without resistance until it reached the goblin's chest. But then, thwack clink, the goblin exploded in a burst of dark ash, blinding me for a second. I stumbled forward, having lost all resistance to my slash. What happened? It's just gone. I felt my sword strike something in its chest, and it just disappeared. The magic crystal. I realized, remembering the tales of Astria's familia, how Elise sometimes pouted because she didn't hold back enough and broke the magic crystals by accident. Right, breaking a monster's magic crystal instantly killed them. Key. A scream jolted me from my thoughts, and I looked up in surprise. The brown goblin was falling towards me from the sky, its spear poised down. How? Again, it had used the other goblin as a distraction to hide its movements, and the moment the ashes covered my vision, it took advantage and jumped. I can't dodge. I realized. If I dodged this attack, then it would hit the girl, and that would be unacceptable. This monster, behind all its savagery, is cunning. My lips thinned and I braced myself. I lowered my stance and I moved my sword back, my left hand on the handle and my right on the pommel, the point aimed at the falling goblin. But it was too late to strike back. The brown goblin fell down with a sadistic grin on its warped face, thinking that it had won already. The only thing I could do was to move a step to the right and accept the stab on my left shoulder instead of my face. Coo! I let out a pained breath when the spear struck me. But it isn't smart enough to understand what the glow on my shirt means. The savage smile twisted into shock when the spear, for all the strength the monster had added with its jump, couldn't fully penetrate my reinforced t-shirt. I let my shoulder be pushed by the strike, ignoring the pain it caused, and using the momentum to add speed to the twist of my waist, I stabbed up with my sword. The hide of the brown goblin seemed to be tougher than the others, but with my own strength added to the speed the goblin was falling. Sir Kay's sword easily pierced through its stomach. Kuha! The goblin let out a pained gasp and gurgled, letting go of its spear and trying in vain to remove itself from the sword that had pierced it through. Warm blood covered my arms and fell down my face and chest. I grimaced. I lowered my blade, letting the goblin slide off it, helped by the slickness of its own blood. It fell with a wet splat and, incredibly, it struggled to rise up again. I looked down at the eyes of the beast, trying in vain to find some part of it that was not cruelty or savagery, but I only found hatred. With a last sigh, I brought down my blade on its head. It was over. 10 seconds, more or less. That's how long that battle took. That's how fast I could kill 3 living beings, ruthlessly. But I had saved a life. Your wish will not come true unless there is a clear evil. Even if it is not something you approve of, a hero of justice requires a villain to defeat. My lips twisted in displeasure, feeling the goblin's warm blood drip from my hands. I rolled my shoulders, feeling a twinge of pain coming from the right one. I looked down and winced a little. While most of the red covering my t-shirt came from the goblin, there was a small trail of blood that came from me. The spear was mostly stopped by my reinforcement, but it still scored a small cut where it managed to pierce through. I would have to treat and disinfect it later. Who knew where that spear's been before? I knew. I had its blueprint vivid in my mind. It wasn't pretty. You actually did it. The girl's shocked whisper brought me out of my reverie. By Gaia, you fucking did it. I snorted, in spite of myself, feeling some amusement at her swearing. A smile bloomed on my face, and I turned to look at her, forgetting that she was practically topless. I got a good look at her shining green eyes filled with amazement, her relieved smile, and the excited flush that extended from her face all the way to the top of her breasts before my eyes widened and I felt heat rush to my cheeks. I turned around so fast that I feared I would get whiplash, not turning back even when I heard an startled squeak coming from the girl followed by a muttered, "Fucking goblin. Goblin slayer. Any chance you have a spare tunic hanging around?" She asked sheepishly. No, just what I have on, I'm afraid," I replied, keeping my eyes away from her. "I can lend you my shirt if you don't mind goblin blood all over you unless—" I stilled, remembering my ideas for projecting clothing. "Ugh, it's that or flashing my tits until I get back home." She grumbled and I closed my eyes, trying not to react to the image her words brought back. She had freckles all the way due. I had to focus to cast my magecraft. Damn it. I'll suck it up, it's just blood. Please lend me your shiny clothing, if you don't mind. She sighed. I might have something else. Just a second. I muttered and extended my right arm in her direction and my other hand on my chest. I focused on the magic energy left over in my circuits. Structural analysis. An image of my t-shirt appeared on my mind, details of its material, the process in which it was produced, the imperfections of its making, and the damage it had accumulated over time filled my thoughts. Trace on. With the image clear on my head, I traced a copy. I could have just used the basic projection spell, but with my tracing I thought I could do a bit more. A pristine white and blue shirt appeared in my hand, looking exactly as it did almost 2 weeks ago, the last time I washed and ironed it. It worked then. Tosaka had hypothesized that I should be able to trace objects at any point of their history if I had access to the blueprint, or had the original with me, but we never had the chance to try before I ended up here. She'll be happy to know she was right. So I wasn't seeing things when you seemed to get stuff out of nowhere," she said, and I felt her taking the shirt from me. "Whoa, what's this? It's so soft. Is this silk? The stuff noble pricks use?" She wondered, her voice muffled by her putting on my shirt I assumed. Feels nice. Hey, I'm done. All the important stuff is covered." I let out a relieved sigh and turned around, this time receiving nothing but the strangely stimulating sight of the red-headed girl wearing my t-shirt. It was a little big on her. She was around my height, but my shoulders were broader, so the collar was almost off her right shoulder, and the slightest bit of cleavage was visible. I didn't know my own shirt could look so different on a woman. I dismissed those thoughts as they came, blaming the adrenaline for my wandering mind, and tried to smile reassuringly, but covered in blood as I was, I don't think I was really successful. The girl tried to smile back, wincing when the skin around the scratches on her face pulled. Looking closely, there were also some splotches of reddened skin here and there. It seemed she had been hit too. "She's gonna be bruised tomorrow. Now that we're not in mortal danger, and I'm not giving you a free show," the girl said, grinning through the pain. "Thank you for the save, hero." I was beginning to think I was gonna end up as goblin food, or worse. I shook my head. "No need to thank me. I'm just glad I got here in time to save you, I stilled for a moment, realizing halfway through my sentence that I didn't know her name yet. She seemed to notice my pause for what it was. Right? I'm Ann, a part-time worker in my mum's leatherwork shop, and full-time idiot considering I wandered into a goblin nest like one, even after I heard all the rumors of the little fuckers around town. My lips twitched in amusement at her description. "I'm Shirou, nice to meet you too, though it would have been a lot nicer under different circumstances." "Right, that was amazing though," she answered, her eyes filled with amazement. "It's the first time I've seen an adventurer fight. It was so fast. A second they were all wrath and growled, making claws with her hands, being all intimidating and shit, and the next you were splitting the last fucker's skull open." She gushed. I felt a little troubled on one hand, while she was praising my skills. The way she said the last thing was a little crude, but on the other, a weight fell from my shoulders. I was glad she was well enough to be so cheerful, even if she was a little wrong about something. I'm not an adventurer though," I corrected her. "Just someone that knows a thing or two about fighting." "Really? But you were so skilled. I don't think my brother can fight like that, and he's a guard." "No blessing in me, just a normal hunter," and looked at me in disbelief, tugging at the shirt I had pulled out of nowhere. I ignored that. We can keep talking on the way back, but we should go. Wait, aren't you going to take the magic stones? You can get almost 20 copper for a goblin's stone, she exclaimed. I shouldn't. It was dangerous. There was no way of knowing if more goblins were going to come, and I had a wounded person with me. But I was in debt. I let out a sigh, a little ashamed of my greed, and a couple of seconds later a dagger appeared on my hand in a flash of light. I turned back to the dead creatures, ignoring Anne's ooh at seeing my magic, and got to work. Hopefully, my experience deboning fish would be of help butchering goblins. I worked in silence for a moment before and asked the question I didn't know I was dreading to hear. Hey, have you seen a dog around here, by any chance? Her tone was casual, but I could hear the worry underneath. Jonas was with me when the first gobo attacked, and we got separated. My hands stopped. So his name was Jonas. I truly had no idea how to tell her, but when I turned around, either my silence or something in my expression must have been enough. Ah, she muttered, and her green eyes filled with tears. Fucking goblins. Fucking goblins, indeed. Author's note. Edited the chapter because, as people rightly said, the rapey vibes were unnecessary. I intended to be a way to show the difference between the surface and dungeon monsters, but following chapter would do that in a better way. I just left the wardrobe malfunction for shits and giggles. For some worries, sexuality and smut will be a part of the story. Not really to the point of overshadowing everything else, but still there, be advised. Chapter 3. He wasn't really my dog, you know? And said softly, her eyes not leaving Jonas' still body. She was kneeling beside him, petting his head with care. He was the town's dog. Everyone pitched in to keep him fed and gave him a place to sleep if it was too cold outside. He liked to play with the children and sometimes even went on patrols with the guards, though he seemed to think that they were just taking him on a stroll. Just like today, when he came with me. It sounds like he lived a loving life. I noted, my voice as soft as hers. He didn't deserve to die like this. No, he didn't. She answered, her voice breaking a little. I was the stupid one who wanted to gather stuff for dinner. Jonas just wanted to accompany me. So why did this have to happen to him? I'm sorry, I said, looking away from her heartbroken face. He was still alive when I found him, but I was too late to help him. My magic is not good for healing. And what an irony that was. I always said that I wanted to help people, but the only thing I was good for was violence. Kotomine must be laughing at me from the grave I put him in. No, it's not your fault. It was my decision to come here even when I heard about the goblins. You saved me. Please, don't fucking apologize for that. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I'm glad I got to you in time, but I wish I could have done more. Stop apologizing, hero. You did more than enough. Right? You were about to apologize again, right? Yeah. Her lips quirked upwards and her eyes brightened a little in amusement. Idiot. Tasaka, I found you another friend. We should go. I said after a few minutes. We don't know if there are any goblins remaining, and we definitely need to get someone to look at that sprained ankle. If you want, I can come later and pick him up. And shook her head. No, it's okay. My brother's gonna come anyway here to patrol later. I'll tell him to do it. She pet Jonas a final time and took the blue handkerchief tied around his neck. Let's go, Shirou. I nodded and promptly picked her up with a small grunt of effort, ignoring the spike of pain in my shoulder dash, one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. Yes, it was the famous Princess Carry. A little embarrassing, but if we get attacked on our way out of the forest, I prefer running away without and on my back to receive the attacks meant for me. The normally spunky girl fell into silence, just like the first time I picked her up like this, a small blush on her cheeks that was gradually growing to cover her face. In the meantime, I started to make my way out of the forest, following the path I used to reach Jonas in the first place. We were about to reach the edge of the forest when it seemed to find her words again. Are we really going to go back like this? She asked, gritting her teeth, a mortified expression on her face. Come on, my brother's gonna tease me. I can walk the way back. I'm sure I must be heavy. I looked down at her extremely swollen right ankle and back at her face with a deadpan expression. No, she pouted. Not even if you make that face. Suck it up. I think your brother might have other stuff to focus on instead of teasing you. And you're not heavy. I lifted sacks of rice heavier than you. Right? She fell silent for a moment, though I heard some low grumbling, comparing rice, mantic at all. We were making our way through the fields when it chimed in again. Hey, Shirou. Can you try not to kill my stupid brother if he gets the wrong idea and tries to defend my honor or something, please? What? Why? Then I realized what she meant. Her coming back in my arms, wearing my clothes might send the wrong idea. But you are clearly wounded. How on earth would he get that idea? Oh, it's kinda obvious nothing like that happened, but my brother is really overprotective and really stupid. He might think we just had a really rough fuck or something. Our rough foo dash.
Anne. What?
She asked, rolling her eyes. Not like this doesn't look like the last scene from A Bard's Tale, where the shiny hero saves the princess and they go off to the sunset, or something. And we're not kids. Everyone knows they fuck afterwards. That's how that stuff goes. But Dash. What Ash? Why are you? I spluttered, unprepared for the word onslaught, but trailed off when I saw her face. My eye twitched when I caught the smug smirk on her face and her mirthful eyes. You're teasing me. I did not pout. Oh, come on. Don't pout. I did not. Just a little teasing is what you deserve for comparing me to Rice of all things. That's not how the hero in the stories gets the damsel to put out, you know? Not romantic at all. And said, shaking her head with a Cheshire grin. My eye twitched once more at her wording, but I decided to take her teasing for what it was, a way to distract herself from the events in the forest. She wasn't coming on to me. Nope, not at all. I sighed, considering how resilient the people of this world must be to survive with literal monsters hunting them. It may be both. Well, sorry that instead of a shiny hero, you just got the guy with the shiny shirt. Not sure if I can compare to your tales. Which was just the moment my reinforcement chose to sputter off, the green glow fading away to nothing. Formerly shiny shirt. Now just a guy. I corrected myself. You're doing just fine, I think. She answered, her husky voice sending a shiver down my back. She made it worse when she circled her arms around my shoulders and rested her head on the crook of my neck. Hey, Shirou, she whispered. Thank you again. Tension left my shoulders, and I shook my head softly. Don't mention it. The moment was ruined, though, when I felt Anne's back go stiff as a board. I looked at her only to find her looking back to the direction we came, her face white. Oh shit. Shirou, look. I turned around and I felt my blood go cold at what I saw near the now distant forest. Goblins. Between the distant trees there were 10. No, more than that. 15? 16? Goblins staring in our direction. Most of them were the shorter, green version, though they were not as sickly thin as the ones I faced. But there were a couple of the bigger brown goblins as well in their midst. But the thing that caught my attention the most was the one standing tall and proud in the middle of the hunched creatures. Was it even a goblin? Its skin was an eye-catching red and it was tall. It was a little hard to tell from this distance, but it was as tall as me, even taller maybe. Its shoulders were broad and its arms were thick and muscled. Most of the goblins were holding crude or old weapons, but the red creature had an iron greataxe resting on its shoulders with familiar ease. Like I said, there were not many details I could catch from this distance, but I could tell that this creature was looking straight at me. And for some reason I could tell that it hated me, even more than I once hated Kodomine Kirii. I did not have much time to inspect the group before they retreated back into the forest as one. They are letting us go? It surprised me a little. The way it had been looking at me, I had expected it would want nothing more than pursuing me. Was that a fucking hobgoblin? And asked, disbelief coloring her voice, making me frown in confusion. Hobgoblin? That thing? I had some passing knowledge of English literature and folklore, thanks to Fujine roping me to help her prepare her classes, but that hulking creature looked nothing like the fey creature mentioned in those tales. I did not think it strange when I faced the goblins, as they were as cruel and malicious as the ones I had heard of, but hobgoblins were supposed to be mischievous fairies, not that. It seemed that for all the similarities I found between this world and the myths and legends of mine, there were some differences as well. Was it? I've never seen one before. I admitted, and nodded, her eyes still stuck to the empty forest. I think so. I mean, I've never seen one either, but the big guy was just like the stories, wasn't it? A bigger, nastier, red goblin that leads the others. I nodded back, not trusting my ability to lie if I spoke. Better to just shut up and accept it. So hobgoblins were bigger goblins. Okay, I can deal with that. Better that than the Fae being a thing here. Those adventurers from Orario better get here fast. Hobs are bad news. We should hurry back and warn the guards then. I resumed my walk back to the town, an urgency to my steps that wasn't there before. They need to know that there is such a big group roaming the forest. That was close. If we had delayed our exit a couple of minutes more, we would have been overwhelmed by that many monsters. Soon enough, the town walls were in sight and I heard and let out a relieved sigh. My shoulders lost some tension too when I caught sight of the 2 gate guards approaching us. We made it back all right. Luckily the guards had been on top of things and after a few questions to Anne, who they seemed to know, probably because of her brother, and some suspicious looks sent in my direction, they decided that we needed to go to the guard station and report directly to the captain, mentioning that there was a healer available to treat us there. They seemed to be taking Anne's words seriously, as their faces had paled when they heard the number of goblins and that there was a hobgoblin leading them. Of the 2 guards, one stayed at his post and the other promptly led us to a big stone keep, just a couple of blocks from the gates. I looked at the building curiously, having never come to this side of the town. I had explored a little, but this part was full of guards 24/7. As an outsider to this town, It looked like an easy way to get arrested for loitering. I expected to be led directly to the guard captain's office or something, but the guard escorting us turned around from the keep's gates and led us to a wooden building right next to it. Barracks, if the beds that welcomed us inside were any indication. You can wait here, and Hunter. All right. I hadn't introduced myself. Rude. I'll tell the captain and the healer to come. And Aaron. He added with a grimace and nodded with the same expression. Just lay down and rest, kid. Everything's gonna be fine. And then he left. I laid down and on a nearby bed, and a relieved sigh escaped me when the strain in my wounded shoulder lessened. Hey, that's rude. You told me I didn't weigh much. She pouted. Something about rice sacks being heavier? They are. I remarked, feeling a smirk appear in my face. But have you tried carrying a protesting sack of rice for such a long distance? Kept squirming too. I added. Much more difficult. Hey, who are you calling a prot? Her voice trailed off once she got a good look at me. Shit, right, you were hurt too. And I had you carry me all this way like a bitch. Sorry. I huffed in amusement. Don't worry about that. It doesn't hurt much. I fibbed a little. It hurt quite a bit. It isn't even bleeding anymore. That, though, wasn't a lie. I didn't know if it was Avalon's influence or something else, but small wounds like this were always quick to stop bleeding. So, Aaron? I'm guessing that's your brother? Got it in one. I'm sure he'll be the first through that door, the big doofus. She answered with a fond smile. We waited only for a few minutes before the door was slammed open, and a big burly man with a bushy beard wearing heavy armor entered the barracks, followed by a young woman wearing a light blue and white dress, a caduceus embroidered on her chest, and a young man, familiar bright red hair and green eyes, clad in a leather cuirass with steel plates here and there. That you, little red? Anne. The two men said at the same time, and the red-haired man, Aaron, I presumed, rushed forward to Anne's side. The woman followed more sedately, while Aaron kept fussing over Anne. Are you all right, Annie? Who did this to you? Your older brother will take care of it, he promises. Aaron, stop. I'm Finn, ouch. Don't touch my face, idiot. I kept my eyes on the more experienced-looking guard so I could see how his expression turned hard, how his shoulders tightened with tension, and how the hand holding the grip of the sword sheathed on his waist went white-knuckled. You look like shit, little red. His voice cut through the siblings, arguing like I parted that goblin in half just a while ago. And he wasn't wrong. The multiple scratches and the slight swelling that began to settle on her face, the hair in disarray, and the fact that my shirt, while covering her modesty, was not enough to cover up the fact that she was wearing only the lower part of her dress, and snorted. Heh, I feel like shit, Captain. My men told me some of what happened, but I need to hear it from you. The events in the forest and what you saw. The numbers and the fucking hobgoblin. I can't just believe anyone that comes to us with such claims. Not even you, little red. The captain said as he sat heavily on a wooden chair, the seat straining with the weight of his armor. Both of you, I haven't forgotten about you, Hunter. I met his hard gaze with a neutral one of my own, then I nodded. And started. I fucked up, that's what happened. She said, lowering her eyes in shame. I went to the forest to pick up some stuff for dinner. She cringed at the disappointed looks she got from that. Her brother made to talk, probably to berate her, but she interrupted him before he could. No, I know. I already said I fucked up. I didn't take the goblin warnings seriously. While and talked, the young woman who had been silent since she entered the room approached me and tilted her head. I looked at her puzzlingly, and she pointed at the caduceus on her chest and then to me. Curious how they use the same symbol for medicine. If I remember right, the caduceus was connected to the Greek god Hermes, right? Was this woman blessed by him, or was it just a symbol every healer used in this world? I shook my head and pointed at and with my chin. I'm fine. Start with her. Her ankle looked bad. The woman tilted her head to the other side, looked pointedly at the wound on my shoulder, but then shrugged. She gave me a beautiful soft smile and left for Anne's side. I don't know why, but that smile sent a cold shiver down my back, like she was telling me, I will be back for you. Don't leave. For a seemingly mute woman, she sure knew how to convey her thoughts. Wouldn't have noticed if Jonas hadn't started barking, but by then it was too late. The goblin was already jumping at us. And continued, hands shaking, and I couldn't help notice the murderous expression on Aaron and, though a little less obvious, the captain. Jonas protected me. He put himself between me and the goblin, and I just ran. I thought he would follow me, but Jonas covered for me. He fought the goblin. I heard growling and then a loud yelp, and I just didn't look back. I left him there. Tears started to gather in her eyes, her voice choking with grief. Is Jonas? Aaron asked, and then just shook her head, the words not leaving her mouth. He's dead. I answered from the side, inserting myself in the explanation. I wouldn't let Anne handle all of the talking. She didn't deserve to tell everything herself when I was there too. He was alive when I found him, but he had a stab wound on his side. I grimaced. It was too late for me to do anything, and when I heard Anne's screams, I decided to focus on rescuing her. So I, too, left him. I deserved some of the blame as well, for my inability to save him when he was right in front of me. Screams? The deep voice of the captain asked. I nodded, meeting his narrowed eyes, and let a small, humorless smile form on my face. She was cursing quite a lot, guided me right to her side. The captain let out an amused huff, and I could hear and giggle wetly. My smile faded, however, when I continued. I found her in a clearing, some distance away, a goblin with a bloody spear right on her. I heard some stories about the viciousness of goblins, so I didn't hesitate to kill it. Just like that, huh? The captain asked rhetorically. You an adventurer, boy? No, just a hunter. I ignored and snorting in incredulity. I had a bow and the goblin was almost inviting an arrow, considering how open its back was. I huffed, almost offended. Hares are harder to hunt. At least they pay attention to their surroundings. The captain did not react outwardly. He just watched me impassively, but I could see Aaron look at and with his eyebrows raised in what seemed to be disbelief, and just shrugged, looking almost exasperated. Even the healer stopped her treatment to send me a curious look. I wonder what that was about. Then, the others appeared. I continued, wanting to get this over with. 3 more came from the forest, most likely attracted by the sound, and couldn't run with her ankle like that, so I had to kill them too. This time the captain snorted, mirth filling his eyes. I'm gonna need more details than that, son. I sighed. I wanted to rush through this so I could go back and wash up, but I guessed I was too prompt, and seemed to have calmed a little while I was talking, and she decided to pitch in. It was incredible. I was panicking a little when they appeared, but Shirou took care of them in a moment, like 2 seconds at most, and explained, her growing excitement drawing a slight tooting from the healer treating her. Aaron snorted, disbelief clear on his expression. Really? You expect us to believe that a hunter of all things took care of 4 goblins on his own? Hey, I just told you what I saw. And protested, incensed. I'm not lying. Hey, I'm not saying that. It's just that. It's hard to believe, isn't it? He's just a brat. That brat just saved your sister, you know? Asshole. Stop. The captain's voice stopped the brewing fight before it got worse, the 2 of them straightening and their faces palling as soon as he spoke. I smiled. He has them well trained. Like I said, Hunter, I want to hear your side before I decide whether to believe your claims or not, so more details and any proof would be appreciated. He said. I gathered my thoughts for a moment, trying to be as succinct as possible would not help, so I would just be straight. Well, as straight as possible. I spent the next few minutes clinically explaining the fight with the goblins, the way they fought, their tenacity, and how I killed them one by one. I felt no pride in my ability to kill those beasts, it was just something that needed to be done. I placed a hand on my shoulder, feeling the cut I received from the last goblin. If I hadn't, Anne and I would be dead. Questions about the weapons I used to fight were answered by a simple, they broke during the battle. I know magic here is widely accepted as something adventurers can do, but that was the problem. I wasn't an adventurer, and I didn't know if there were non-blessed mages, or if me knowing some spells would raise uncomfortable questions, and was silent throughout the explanation, for some reason not calling me out on my lie. It was when I described the last goblin, the outlier one, that the captain decided to speak. A brown one, you say? He asked, intrigued. That's an old one. 10 years old, at the least, so no wonder it was smarter. You were lucky, boy. Goblins get craftier as they get old. If that cut was all you got, then you got off lightly. I nodded. I hadn't expected even basic planning from them after the stories, and I got punished by it. And as for proof, would these be enough? I took out the 3 magic stones I got from the goblins, 2 small ones, the size of a pinky finger's nail, and a bigger one. The purple crystals seemed to shine with their own light, and I was still slightly surprised by the amount of magic they contained, even the smaller ones. Enough to fuel a couple of my mysteries, if I ever managed to find a way to use them for that. Tosaka would be in her element here. The captain looked at the stones in my hand, still speckled with blood, and sighed deeply, his eyes dark. And the others? The hob? We were halfway through the fields when we saw them. 15 or so goblins, mostly green ones, but there were a few that were brown, and a hobgoblin leading them. The room fell silent for a moment before the captain sighed again. Aaron, muster the forces. I want double the guards on the gates, double the patrols. Spread the word around town. No one is to approach the forest. The adventurers are expected to arrive either tonight or tomorrow. We're going to need to be on high alert until then. Get to it. Yes, sir. Aaron stood up and gave a salute, crossing his right arm over his body and placing a closed fist over his heart. He then kissed Anne's brow, making her grumble in embarrassment, and muttered something in her ear. He turned around and went to the door, stopping before he opened it to glance at me. Sorry for being a dick, brat, and thank you for saving Annie. And then he left. And the captain both let out an exasperated sigh when the door closed. Told you he was stupid. And groused. He is. The captain agreed. But I apologize for him as well. It was nothing against you. He was just angry that someone else had to save his sister in his place. I hope you can forgive him. I shook my head, a sad smile on my face. I understand. There's nothing to forgive. I wasn't as close to her as Aaron, and it seemed to be, but I had a little sister too. I knew firsthand what it was to feel useless as the last member of my family died. I wouldn't wish it on him, rude as he was, and let out a sad oh, and seemed to curl into herself, hugging one knee to her chest and hiding her face. The other leg was left extended as the silent healer was rubbing some kind of ointment in her swollen ankle. You're a good lad. The captain gave my shoulder a couple of pats. Luckily, it was the unharmed one, with a bright grin. Now, I think we are done here. You are welcome to use the beds if you need to rest. My boys will be too busy to use them for now. And before I forget, he took 2 shiny silver coins from a pouch and placed them on my right hand. For taking care of those goblins, and for saving the little girl of a good friend of mine. Thanks, Hunter. No. Shirou, was it? I nodded, feeling a little conflicted. I hadn't done what I did for monetary gain, so it felt bad to accept coin for it. But the crux of the matter was that I was in debt, and I hadn't hunted anything today. I have to pay Astria back before she leaves. I glanced at my ruined shirt, stained heavily with blood and torn at the shoulder, and buy new clothes. The magic crystals would help, but I had to find where to sell them first. I sighed, closing my hand. I would be selfish for once and take it as a pest removal fee. The captain nodded once more and left, likely to oversee the guard's movements. The healer worked on, and while she was in a pensive mood for a little more before finally switching back to me. My treatment was fast in comparison to Anne's, the healer only cleaning my wound and adding some ointment before bandaging it. It was, though, a little awkward. I had to slide my arm out of my t-shirt, and it seemed to take that as permission to pretty much ogle any exposed skin. I didn't know what part of all of this she found attractive, considering I was covered in dried blood, but she seemed to enjoy the show nonetheless. Once the healer was satisfied, she helped me back to my shirt, much to the red-headed pervert's grumbling, and nodded at us both before leaving. Do you want me to carry you back to your home? I asked her while moving my left arm a little. It didn't hurt anymore. Maybe that ointment was a pain reliever of some sort. Nah, that's fine. Aaron told me he'd tell Mom to pick me up. You already did more than enough for me in one day, Shirou. She grinned, her tone a mix of thankful and exasperated. Oh, are you going to need this back? Mom's probably bringing a change of clothes, so you can take it then, she asked, tugging at the shirt she was wearing. I shook my head. It's okay. You can keep it. Just be careful. It's not an actual shirt. It's just my magic energy taking that shape. Really? She tugged a little harder, like she was testing how real it was, and unintentionally exposing a little more cleavage. Is it going to disappear or something? I glanced away, ignoring the cheeky smile on her face. Right, unintentionally. I don't think so. There's some stuff back home that I made years ago and never disappeared, but I wouldn't trust it, just in case. It's the first time I made an object to last here. Maybe the rules are different. What a shame. It's really comfy. She sighed mournfully. Well, I can always use it for sleeping, she muttered before perking up, like she got a good idea. Hey, this one smells nice, but can you make another with your smell in it? You know, for reasons. My eye twitched. This girl. My walk back to the inn was tense. I've been living here for a little less than a fortnight, and the town always had an air of tranquility. Part of it was because half of the rather sparse population worked in the mines during the day, leaving the children and housewives, and househusbands, as the gender norms were a little looser here with the addition of physically strong races like dwarves and beast people, and hadn't that been a shock, house-sitting as it were. Of those remaining, some would be working on the few crop fields outside town and tending the cattle, or cleaning clothes in the river nearby, or attending some stalls. It was busy, for sure, but there was no sense of urgency in the townsfolk. No stress and no worries, aside from putting food on the table. It was, as I noted before, slow. Or, rather, it had been. I was a little shocked to find the town full of people at such an early hour. News about the goblins must have spread rapidly, as there was an air of tension and fear hanging over the town. Folk who would usually be either in the mines or the town outskirts were congregating in the small square where the stalls were standing listening to the words of the guard in the middle. I didn't hear much, but warnings about the forest and even the nearby fields were made, mentioning the possibility of a strong monster being the leader of a big group of goblins. It was only the mention of the adventurers from Orario arriving soon that made the folks relax a little. I tried to pass without attracting too much attention, but my bloody shirt made that an impossible task. There were some wary looks sent my way, but luckily most of them were focused on the speaking guard. Still, just in case, I promptly left for the inn. It was when I entered said inn that I realized that word might have spread a bit too fast. Pressure filled the lounge of the inn, and I felt my shoulders tense for a moment before I recognized the familiar warmth of Astria's divinity. I glanced around the deathly silent room. Finding the source of the divine aura wasn't hard. The goddess was a beacon in my senses, but even if it wasn't, I would only need to follow the odd looks from the other patrons. I wondered for a second what was happening. Seeing a god shouldn't be such a shocking thing, right? But then I realized that if Astria's godly aura that is usually hidden deep inside her was noticeable enough for these people to feel, then they might be feeling the full presence of her divinity, of a deity's divinity, for what may be the first time. I approached the goddess sitting on the same table we shared last night, feeling her blue eyes inspect me from head to toe, stopping for a moment on the wound on my shoulder, her focus sharpening to the point that she seemed to stop breathing, until her whole body seemed to sag in relief. I'm okay, Astria. Most of this blood isn't mine. I smiled awkwardly, gesturing to my bloody t-shirt. But some of it is, she said, standing up and approaching me. Her hand hovered over my shoulder, as if she was afraid to touch my wound. I felt goosebumps rise on my skin at her proximity. Being exposed to her unfiltered aura was almost smothering. I heard that a hunter was wounded and had to be rushed to the guard's healer covered in blood. I didn't want to believe it was you, but when I didn't find you in your room, I expected the worst. What happened, Shirou? For just a moment, the sorrow she expertly hid in her eyes was clear as a day. Shamefully, warmth filled my chest. The concern this deity could show to a person she just met wasn't something I expected to see from a god before I met her, and it made me wonder, were all gods like this? Or was it her that was special? A goblin happened. I underestimated it and paid for it, but I'm fine. I added hastily when her expression twisted in concern. But more important than that, Astria, your divinity. Astria looked confused by my words, but then she saw the state of the people around her. Oh my, how sloppy of me, she muttered, covering her mouth in embarrassment, her face flushing. I let out a sigh when the pressure abated, the goddess essence. Not disappearing, but was constrained once again. I smiled. That's better. The rest of the patrons seemed to shake themselves out of their reverie and return to their drinks, their eyes glancing at our direction every now and then. Though that could be because I'm still covered in goblin blood. Astria cleared her throat. Right, I'm guessing you need to change? She asked rhetorically. How about you wash yourself and we meet in my room? Now that the concern for me had faded, a giddy smile bloomed on her face. Now that I know you are all right, I want to hear all about your first adventure here. Chapter 4. Fascinating, Astria muttered, her eyes entranced by the piece of fabric she held between her fingers. Said piece of fabric being the shirt I was wearing at the moment, a traced copy of the original that I had left soaking in soapy water in my room. Such a precise use of magic, if you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have noticed that it was made out of mana. She tore her eyes from the t-shirt and met my own in awe. And every mage from this Fuyuki you came from can do magic like this? To be able to create such detailed objects from a spell is impressive. Maybe? This particular spell is an advanced form I made of one of the most basic spells there are back home. I scratched the back of my head, feeling a mix of shame and pride. Most mages using it would just get a simple hollow shell in the form of the object, and so they ignore it for a more useful spell. Or at least, that was what Tasaka told me when I showed her my own brand of projection. I'm just a third rate and my first teacher died before he could teach me more, so I decided to do the best I could with what I knew. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times was a famous quote back home, and what I used to say to myself to raise my spirits when I practiced with my meager spell repertoire. I had always struggled with reinforcement and alteration, but structural analysis? Tracing? Those, I was able to cast easily, even with my fake magic circuits. And so, I polished them to their limits, to develop a basic ability to the point it could possibly fool a god's eye. Very impressive. She let go of my shirt and sat down on her bed, a proud smile on her face. No, it's not impressive at all. I just happened to end up with something useful. It was only luck. I'm actually better at creating weapons. Anything else is just average. I denied, embarrassed at the undeserved praise to something that would only be mocked by a proper magus back home. Well, Tasaka had praised me when she first started teaching me. How? How on earth you stumbled your way into this? You third-rate hack. In her own way, of course. Astria pouted. Mao, just accept praise when it's given. If I say something is praiseworthy, then it is. She raised her nose in mock haughtiness. I should know. I'm a goddess. She kept her imperious stare for a moment before she broke and started to giggle, and I couldn't help but let out a huff of amusement. So, Leaving that aside, you have a story to regale me with. Come, sit and tell your god. I raised an eyebrow when her breath seemed to hitch and her cheeks flushed. She cleared her throat. Come, sit and tell me everything. She corrected herself, her volume raising as if to cover up her previous words. Something she used to say to her familia. Maybe? I ignored the way she was patting the spot next to her on the bed, and the way her cheeks puffed up slightly in a pout when I did so, and sat down on one of the chairs provided with the room. Once again I found myself telling the story of my first encounter with the monsters of this world, this time to a very captive audience. From my failed hunting trip, to my rush into the forest to find Jonas and then Anne, and my fight with the goblins. By the way she was oohing and ahhing, it made me feel like I was telling her the myth of Berserker, Heracles, himself, and not a hunting trip gone wrong. Couldn't you have dodged it? Astria asked once I reached the part where the brown goblin surprised me with his jump. Maybe. I admitted. I was taken aback by the attack, but I could have moved out of the place before he got to me. However, but Anne was there. Had I moved, the spear would have struck her, and she didn't have reinforced clothing. I added the last part jokingly. Really, once the possibility of her being hurt entered the equation, taking the attack was my only option. I had to protect her. If someone had to be hurt, then it's better it was me. Astria looked at me with an intensity one would not have expected from her normally warm self. Was she mad at my stupidity? It certainly seemed so as she grabbed the skirt of her dress tight enough that her hands shook, and her face got a little red in anger. It looked like anger. It reminded me a little of Tosaka whenever I said something without thinking, which unfortunately happened a lot. Sorry, I don't like seeing people hurt when I can do something about it. That's the kind of person I am. I felt a sardonic grin grow on my face. You did call me reckless and stubborn yesterday, so don't be surprised when I do something stupid. Her eyes widened a little more, and for a moment I thought I could see tears gathering in her eyes, but she closed them and shook her head before I could confirm. When she opened them back, her indigo blue eyes were full with warmth and mirth, and something deeper, fonder. She smiled sweetly, the angry red on her cheeks fading to a soft pink, and the afternoon sun chose that moment to illuminate her body with its radiance. Really, this woman was truly unfair. Something I might need to get used to when it comes to you, it seems. She said in a soft voice. Shirou. She said after a moment. Do you mind continuing? I'm curious about the rest. She asked, a small grimace marring her face. For some reason, I felt that she was about to say something else, and was berating herself for changing her mind at the last second. There wasn't much left to tell after that, and Astria had already heard of the goblin herd that had the town concerned, so I was done just a couple minutes later. I hope you are not considering handling them yourself, Shirou, she said, eyeing me suspiciously. You may have done extremely well against the smaller group, but you should leave the hobgoblin and the others to the adventurers. Don't worry, I'm not actually suicidal, I said, and Astria got a complicated expression on her face, like she has trouble believing my words. I should be offended, but she wouldn't be the first to think that. I only faced them because someone needed help. I'm not going to go look for the rest. I wonder if I can believe the words of a self-proclaimed reckless man. She joked, her lips twitching in amusement. I grinned too. Well, if we drink as much as we did yesterday night, I might have to consider it. If I didn't, I would need to borrow even more valley from you. I took one of the silver coins from my pouch and showed it to her. Speaking of here, this is yours. Astria took the silver coin, confused. I told you I would pay you back, didn't I? I asked rhetorically, an awkward smile on my face. Astria sighed. Shirou, she said, disappointment in her tone. I can't take that. That's the money you earned for your actions. I only accepted the money to pay you back. Please take it. Astria dithered for a second, but in the end decided to grab the coin from my hand. I will treasure it. Strangely, she looked at the silver coin with fondness, like it was worth more than it truly was. I grinned, feeling some amusement. It's just money, spend it instead. No, it's proof of what you did today, of the adventure you had. She glanced up from it, the warmth of her smile making my heart beat a little faster. Until you have a fauna, your actions may go unrecorded, but I will remember them whenever I look at this coin. I see. Then do as you like. I shrugged. It did not feel like a great accomplishment for me, but if Astria thought so, then I wouldn't say anything. Still, who knew slaying monsters was that profitable? Astria giggled at my question. Everyone does, silly. That's why so many people become adventurers. Even those that do not seek glory and fame, do it for the money. I guess it makes sense. When I really thought about it, the only reason I was as okay as I was about killing the goblins was because they wanted to hurt Anne, but I shouldn't see them as a way to get rich fast. Their anger, their pain, it was all too real. Would you want to? I was pulled out of my musings by Astria's tentative question. I tilted my head. not quite understanding what she meant. She cleared her throat a little and tried again. Would you want to be an adventurer? I mean, if you had the chance. She added the last part in a rush and tried to look nonchalant, but I could see she was really interested in my answer. I thought for a second. It had been my intention to become an adventurer, but I wonder what that answer would look like to a goddess that had lost most of her members as a result of being one. Would it offend her? Would she worry for my safety? Would she consider taking me if I showed interest? To be honest, I don't know if I'm being hasty, considering she's the first goddess I met, but I don't think I would want to join any familia other than hers. I liked her. I would. I finally answered. It's actually my plan to go to Orario and join a familia. I see. Orario, huh? Her expression was confusing and changing. One moment elated, then regretful, hopeful, and then fearful. I hope you find a god that brings out the best out of you. I'm sure you will be an amazing adventurer. Can I ask why, though? Being an adventurer is dangerous. Is it money? Her lips quirked upwards into a small, impish smile. Popularity? Never cared for popularity, I guess. I wasn't the most popular guy in my high school, and you don't get a nickname like the fake janitor when you care about your image. Money can be useful, but I don't think I would like to risk my life just for it. There was another thing she mentioned before. Glory, though. The golden glow of the sword of promised victory filled my mind. The regal appearance of its wielder, the woman whose legend was known across the world. If that wasn't glory, then what was it? If there was a way of getting close to her memory, I could see myself pursuing glory. Astria smiled softly and opened her mouth to say something, but I continued before she could. Although, there's another reason for which I would consider fighting against monsters. Something more important to me. Her eyes widened, and she leaned forward, curiosity filling her posture. Seeing how interested she was in my answer made me feel a little bad about bringing it up but I think I will keep that to myself. Unwittingly, my sheepish smile turned into a grin when Astria's face fell with dismay. Don't be like that, now I'm curious. She complained, the previous cocktail of conflicting emotions fading into indignation. Shirou, please tell me. I wasn't doing it to tease her much. I just wanted to distract her from her own thoughts. Come on, we should go down and have some dinner. It's not healthy to skip 2 nights in a row. I stood from my seat and started walking to the door, ignoring her plea. I was going to tell her about my dream eventually, the promise I gave to Dad all those years ago, but not now. Shirou, don't be mean. You are being unfair, you know? Hey Shirou. After all, how embarrassing would it be to tell the goddess of justice herself that I wanted to be a hero of justice? The next day was slow. Until the goblin problem was resolved, it was too dangerous to go hunt. So Astria and I spent the whole day getting to know each other better. There wasn't much else I could do. After all, we had breakfast together, then took a small stroll around the village, which we immediately decided to cut short as the atmosphere in the town was difficult. Guards were patrolling in force, trying to give some sense of security to the people around them, but it was easy to see that they were as worried as the civilians. We walked around a little before we decided that it was better to just hang in the inn until things were better. I spoke a little more of Fuyuki, trying to omit any details that would give away that it was in a completely different universe. Eventually, I would need to come clean to her about my origins, probably before I asked for her blessing, if I ever decided to do so. Anyway, but it seemed like a heavy topic for the moment. When she asked me if I had any family, I evaded telling her about the fate of my blood family. Instead, I told her of Kiritsugu and Ilya, the man who adopted me and the girl I barely got to know as a sister. I tried not to delve into their fate as well, wanting not to bring down the mood, but Astria was sharp enough to notice, if the way she held my hand when I finished talking about them was any indication. I talked about some of my friends, like Issei, Sakura, and Tosaka, and about Fujine and her antics, and she shared more stories of Elise and her other girls. We spent hours in the lounge of the inn, swapping stories back and forth until it was almost 5 or 6 in the afternoon. It was just as the sun had begun to set when things changed. So, what does that woman do just because I called her by a nickname? She exchanges my soy sauce for oyster sauce. I had to remake the whole thing because of her little prank. Astria's shoulders shook as she tried to smother her giggles behind her hand. Well, hee, it sounds like you got what you deserved then. She commented. You shouldn't have teased your guardian like that. Are you taking her side too? Sakura said the same, but I think an adult shouldn't act so childish. I grumbled, trying to sound stern even as my lips threatened to turn into a grin. You are the goddess of justice. Isn't fair retribution an important part of that? She clearly went overboard. I joked. Oh my, so harsh. Well, I am of the opinion that each person has to follow their own justice. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest as she declared magnanimously. So, childish or not, if Taiga's justice means messing with your dinner, then I have to accept it. I huffed. Really, what's up with women ganging up against me, even across dimensions? I see. Thank you so much for your whisk dash. I began to speak. sarcasm filling my voice when our conversation was interrupted when the front door was slammed open, the wood and iron door hitting the wall with a loud blam. I was halfway off my seat, about to open my magic circuits when Astria's hand held me back. I didn't look at her, my eyes focused on the individuals entering the inn with purpose. I relaxed and felt a little silly when I realized that it wasn't goblins entering, but just normal people. Or at least, normal for this world. Wait, there's no danger. I recognized the source of divinity in them. They are an acquaintance's children. The three that entered looked as attention-grabbing as their entrance. The one in the front was a dwarf in what I guessed were his early 20s. Or at least he fitted the description I was given of the members of that race. Short, stout, with thick muscled arms and a bushy black beard, wearing bright red brigandine armor and carrying a heavy-looking warhammer. His blue eyes were looking around the inn with barely concealed annoyance. Following him was a human man in his 40s, bright blonde hair and yellow eyes, with a face that would have looked handsome if not for the scar crossing the right side of his mouth up to his cheekbone, giving him a permanent sneer, even though his expression looked placid otherwise. He was wearing half-plate armor and had a steel greatsword strapped to his back. The last one was a petite woman with rather short light blue hair, wearing leather clothing and a hooded half-cloak, a short sword in a sheath on one side of her waist, and a dagger in the other. Normally, by her height, I would have assumed she was a young girl, but the confidence in her posture and the way she was looking around with experienced green eyes told me another story. She was a Palom, most likely. I don't know if it was Astria's clear divine nature or my sudden movement, but the dwarf's wandering eyes zeroed on us almost instantly. He muttered something to his companions and pointed at us with his chin before approaching our table with swift steps, the other two right behind him. "Can we help you, children of Hephaestus?" Astria asked once they reached us, a welcoming smile on her face. The adventurers looked at the goddess with some trepidation. Were they surprised she knew who their patron was? I, for my part, wasn't surprised when I heard the name of the Greek god of the forge. The weapons each wielded were forged by their own hands, after all. The dwarf grunted, suspicion in his eyes. "I'm afraid you have us at a disadvantage, goddess." He grunted, looking between Astria and me. No one told us that another familia was here. He almost growled, irate, muttering under his breath something about wasting his time. The human kept his placid expression, but the Palom looked scandalized at the tone the dwarf was speaking in. "You weren't informed because there isn't a familia here," Astria said, her expression unchanging. "Shirou here is not my child. I'm afraid he hasn't taken my blood yet," she continued, and I blinked at her words. "Yet? As such, your time, precious as it is in comparison to these good people's lives, was not wasted." Her words were frosty, and her smile sharpened a bit. The dwarf cleared his throat, maybe not expecting her to catch his muttered words. Just saying. Just thought we've made a long trip for nothing." He tried to assure her in a rush. The Palom let out a put-upon sigh. She stepped forward, slapping the dwarf on the head on the way, much to his grumbling. "Forgive my companion, goddess. We are a little tired from the road. We were supposed to have arrived earlier, but our carriage broke on the way here. We know the situation is dire, and the guard captain sent us here for more information." She then looked at me, her green eyes roaming up and down my body. "Evaluating a threat, most likely. We are looking for a hunter named Shirou. That's what she called you, isn't it?" she asked, her demeanor a lot more affable than the dwarf's. I was a little confused about why they let the dwarf talk first. Maybe he is the leader? Not likely, if his diplomacy said something about him. And if my eyes didn't deceive me, he wasn't the strongest of the three either. Considering the quality of their weapons, and what I can read from them, I glanced at the blonde man, standing behind the two others, his placid expression unchanging. His sword was the best made of the bunch, and if the amount of time he spent polishing his technique with it said something, I think he's the one in charge. "It is," I answered, dismissing my thoughts. "I'm guessing you want to hear about the goblins?" The dwarf scoffed, drawing another glare from the Palom. "You really going to listen to his shite, Ash?" he said, glaring at me with contempt. "I say we just go to sleep and murder those fucks in the morning. No reason to talk to him. They are just surface goblins. What can they do to us?" "We need to know about the Hobrath," she said with gritted teeth. "Gregor didn't come with us. We're just level ones here, so we have to be careful. Like the captain always says, overconfidence gets you killed against monsters." "Huh. We're gonna be fine. How many gobos we kill every day just walking down the dungeon?" The dwarf barked a short mocking laugh. "And there's no hob. Look at him. There's no way this kid killed 4 goblins on his own. The fucker probably ran away from one of them and made up the scary hobgoblin to save face. Probably trying to fool the goddess into accepting I'm not lying," I said, my eyes narrowing at the slew of insults. I shouldn't really care about what this adventurer thought of me, but there was a small part of me that bristled at his dismissal of what happened. Jonah's sacrifice, and pain and tears, and the deaths I caused. If you want to hear about what I know, ask away, otherwise. He acted like everything was a lie to gain attention. No, it's proof of what you did today, of the adventure you had, and in front of Astria no less. Otherwise, if you are here just to insult me, then leave, I have nothing to say to you. You're just ruining my dinner with my goddess friend. I stood up from my chair, ignoring the way Astria kept holding my hand, trying to hold me back. The dwarf's eyes narrowed and he took an aggressive step forward, his mouth twisted into a smirk. Ho, and if I don't wanna? What are you gonna do? Bradash wrath. The dwarf froze mid-sentence when the blonde man spoke for the first time. You are embarrassing us. Even worse, you are embarrassing our goddess in front of another, he said. His voice would sound almost emotionless if not for the bit of anger that crept into his tone. Wrath turned around, his face irate. But Atticus, I was just Just shut up for now. Anything you say will only make this worse for yourself. I will report this to Gregor and to Lady Hephaestus once we are back home. Ash, take the lead for now. The dwarf clicked his tongue and turned around. Did he just say Lady Hephaestus? The blue-haired Palom stood straight at his words. Okay, Atticus. The girl approached us, a guilty smile on her face. Please, forgive us for our rudeness. We just want to ask a couple of questions, Shirou, goddess, she said, trailing off. I am Astria. Astria answered, her voice shaking the ether around us and the words making the Palom's eyes widen in awe. You know of me, child. She noted and glanced at the other two. The blonde man, Atticus, looked at her with aloof curiosity and the dwarf gulped when the goddess' cold eyes posed on him. Then know this. I heard what happened from Shirou already, and his words held no falsehood. That, I swear by the justice I represent, she declared, her grip in my hand tightening as she met my eyes, a soft smile blooming on her face. You can consider his words as pure as mine in this case. It seems that her words seemed to be enough for both of them, more so in Ash's case, as she nodded eagerly in response. She settled in and focused her attention on me, though her attention seemed to gravitate to Astria from time to time, a curious expression on her face. It seems Astria had a fan. Some minutes later, after retelling my story, I found myself looking down at a piece of parchment Ash had placed on the table. If you could, point to where you saw the group of goblins. We plan on having some guards familiar with the place escort us tomorrow, but we need somewhere to start, and any clue will help. A simple map of Westmount and its surroundings was drawn on the parchment, the town and the fields in the center, the mountain to the west and the forest to the southwest. The two gates, one to the south and another to the east, and the roads coming out of them were clearly marked. I knew, from what I've heard, that the eastern road led to Orario, and the southern one curved to the west, circling the mountain and going to the sword-smithing city of Zollingen. I examined the map, recalling my movements from yesterday. I entered the forest from here. I pointed with my finger at the approximate place. I walked some distance to the south, found Jonas, and then rushed east. My finger trailed over the map following my words. The clearing where I fought the goblins would be around here. Ash bit the side of her lip, looking like she was trying to find the goblin's hideout on the rather simple drawing. I guess the best option would be to look around there then. It's the only clue we have. She looked to her companions. Atticus had his attention on the map, but the dwarf was almost sulking to the side, ignoring the conversation and drinking from a tankard in his hand. When did he have time to get that? I wondered. I don't think so, Atticus added, his yellow eyes distant. Shirou, you said the goblins appeared from the same direction you came, correct? I tilted my head. Yeah, that's right. Atticus placed a finger on the map, following a line back to the place I first found the dog. And the first goblin pursued the girl from here as well. It took me a moment to understand where he was going with this. They all came from the west. The first goblin that found her, and the others that followed the noises. I mused and Atticus nodded in agreement, followed by Ash's mouth opening in a, understanding flooding her eyes. Astria, for her part, was silently sitting on the side, content just observing the meeting. And if they were close enough to hear the commotion and reach us in just minutes, then the hideout must not be that far away in that direction. Ash said, hitting the palm of her hand with her fist. Good. I'm a decent tracker. With that much I'm sure I can find them easily. She smiled, standing with newfound confidence in her posture, and Atticus nodded with a small smile. Thank you, Shirou. You've been a lot of help, Ash said finally, extending a hand to shake. You're welcome. Good hunting, I guess. I smiled awkwardly, grabbing her much smaller hand with mine. The Palom nodded, before perking up a little. Hey, you want to come with us tomorrow? You sound like you can handle yourself in a fight, even without a fauna. Any help's welcome, considering the numbers. I tilted my head and made to speak, but Atticus spoke before I could. Ash, we don't ask civilians, even those skilled, to fight for us. We are being paid to handle this, not to let others risk themselves. He said disapprovingly. Ash winced, but ultimately nodded. You're right, Atticus. Sorry, Shirou, got a little ahead of myself. She apologized with a small smile, but I didn't mind. I would have probably agreed, but I guess I would have gotten in the way of the fighting. Better to be safe than sorry against those monsters. The group left soon after, picking up the dwarf from a nearby table where he was drinking, and retired early to rent a room. It seemed like they would plan their trip tomorrow with the guards, so they could handle the goblins and leave town before night fell. I got a glimpse of them going to the second floor, their grumbling companion in tow. I nodded at Atticus when he met my eyes, and Ash, seeing him curtly nod back, looked down from the stairs and gave me a small wave. They are good children. Astria mused from her seat, looking in the same direction as me, her hand raised after waving back at the palom. Well, most of them. She added with a small grimace. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he was just tired. I said, not really believing that. Atticus had said he was in thin ice already, so I was going to assume that his attitude was a known problem. They want to leave tomorrow, not really worth nursing a grudge to someone I may not meet again. Astria let out a pleased hum and patted one of my hands over the table. Really mature of you, Shirou, she said proudly. But are you sure about that? HM? Well, you have a point. I might meet them in Orario, right? I mused. That too. But what I mean is… Astria hesitated for a second before continuing. You got along well with those two, and I could see they were impressed by you. I nodded. Both Ash and Atticus had both praised me, and berated me a little too, for my encounter with the monsters. You could join them, you know? On their way back to Orario, I mean. My eyes widened. It made some sense, I guessed. If I wanted to leave soon, then going with the adventurers was a safe and easy way to do so. I could even ask them about the situation in the city. The old man had mentioned in passing that the city had had a problem with criminals and evildoers, but supposedly, things had calmed down under Loki's and Freya's rule. But if I choose to leave with them, then what about? Hephaestus is a wonderful goddess. I know her. She continued softly, her words forming a small knot in the pit of my stomach. Was she saying I should join Hephaestus Familia instead? Rejecting me before I even asked? I'm sure she is, but I thought? I answered, still a little out of sorts about the difference of gender of the deity in comparison to my world. Although, really thinking about it, I shouldn't be too surprised after meeting Saber. Astria tilted her head, her smile turning a little impish, and I narrowed my eyes. You thought? She asked teasingly, likely already knowing my answer. I cleared my throat, feeling some heat gathering in my cheeks. She's going to make me say it, isn't she? Is this revenge for before? I wanted a little more time before I considered asking, but better to evade misunderstandings. I would make my feelings clear and let her decide. I thought, I'd join you. You're Familia, I said, my fists tightened a little over the table. Was I assuming too much when I thought you were thinking the same? Astria's smile widened a bit, but also gained an edge of sadness. You are not wrong, she admitted. I haven't known you for long, but in that time I understood that you are kind, chivalrous, and selfless. Exactly the kind of person I'd want in my Familia. If this were a year ago, had we met before my children died, I'm sure they would have agreed you deserve my blessing. Her lips quirked up a little in amusement. Even if you are a little too male for their taste in party members, they would have had some reservations, but they would have welcomed you with open arms, nonetheless, once they got to know you. My heart warmed a little at her words, even if the admission of what I already suspected gave the whole thing an edge of sadness. So it happened just a year ago. I lowered my eyes, a little ashamed about opening her wounds like this. Then Astria's dainty hand appeared in my sight and held my clenched fist softly, the warmth of her contact doing a lot to calm my restless feelings. I looked up. I would love to give my Falna to you, to have my blood run through your veins, to witness your story with my own two eyes, to have my sword and my wings guide your way. The more she spoke, the more radiant she looked, the wider her beautiful smile got, the brighter her eyes shone. But then, like a light going off, all of that radiance faded. But I don't have much to offer to you, not anymore. You deserve far more than an empty guild house and some secondhand advice. Hephaestus is well known, and she's established in the city. You only need to show her your creation magic, and she'll take you, I'm sure. And she has countless children that can go with you to the dungeon. She continued, a sad smile on her face. And I can't even offer that. I only have Ryu, and considering the way we parted, I can't guarantee her assistance. I gritted my teeth. In a ruthless, logical way, Astria was right. If I wanted to get the best start, then joining a Familia that is already established in Orario was my best bet. I wasn't a blacksmith by any means, but I'm sure I could learn how to forge weapons. The knowledge I get from my weapons isn't limited to combat, but also includes the forging process. It would be like having a cheat sheet with me. Joining Hephaestus would probably be for the best. And so, I answered, I don't care. Astrea looked at me with wide eyes, shock clear in her features. I was glaring at her, I distantly noted. I was angry, and why shouldn't I be? To reduce the fledgling bond that is forming between us to merits and demerits. To whatever monetary value I would get from joining one or the other. To advantages I would get in the dungeon. That wasn't what I wanted from you. I denied, trying to control my ire. I don't care about any bonuses you can offer with your blessing. I want you, Astrea, because you were kind. Because you worried about a complete stranger that was being an idiot. Because you care. I was worried about meeting a god for the first time, but you showed me that deities can feel love, grief, joy, and sadness. The burning embers started to douse as I spoke. I sighed, and let a smile form on my face. I want your blessing because I stopped, realizing that I was spilling my heart out in the middle of a bar lounge. I cleared my throat, ignoring the multiple eyes on us. Ignoring the way crystal-clear tears started to fall down from the goddess of justice's indigo blue eyes. I don't know much about you yet, but I know I want to get to know you more. I want to know more about Elise and Kagaya, about Lyre, Nise and Iska, about all the children you loved and lost. I want to get to know Rio Lion, but I can't do that if I'm not at your side. I fell silent and had to drink a sip of my mug to moisten my throat after spilling my feelings all over the table. I sighed once I finished and looked at the goddess in front of me, still recovering from my onslaught of words. She finally answered a couple of seconds later. I'm sorry, she said, her voice soft, while wiping her tears with her sleeves. I didn't want to offend you with my words. I shook my head, not caring at all. Like all of Astrea's actions so far, her words came from a place of care. She closed her eyes and took a deep shuddering breath, visibly calming down. When she looked at me again, her eyes were once again a pool of calm. She smiled. Your feelings and determination reached me, but I hope you understand mine. Can you give me some time to decide? Of course, whatever you need. I acquiesced. I'm sorry for my selfishness. It must be hard for you to consider something like this. Astrea giggled. There's no need to apologize, silly. There's some matters I need to meditate about before I share my blood with you. Before I make the decision to return to Orario. I felt a stab of shame. Of course it would be hard for her. That's the city where she lost her familia. You could say I'm preparing myself. She placed her hand over her heart and a now familiar, teasing expression took over her face. Oh my, I wonder if this is how it feels to have someone confess their love to you. My heart is aflutter. I managed to keep my reaction under control and raised an unimpressed eyebrow. Astrea pouted. Oh, it's not as funny if you don't react, party pooper. I sighed exasperatedly, but soon felt a smile come to my face. She was a bit of a tease, but hopefully I would get time to get used to her antics in the future. Yes, a lot more time. The adventurers left a little before midday the next day. They had intended to leave earlier, but the dwarf, Wrath, seemed to have snuck back to the bar after they retired and woke up with a nasty hangover. The other two didn't seem happy at all of the time they were losing, waiting for him to recover as much as possible for their mission. I had to consciously distract myself from the fact that they were going to be fighting the monsters while I was lazing the day away by focusing on the goddess walking beside me. Not wanting to spend another day inside, I decided to stretch my legs by going another, hopefully longer, walk around the town. Astrea decided to come with me because she was bored, most likely. The town guards were looking a lot more relaxed this time around, and I could see some normality returning to the townsfolk. The adventurers brought some hope back to the place. And that's when everything went wrong. We were walking near the south gate when a commotion caught our attention. There was a group of guards huddled near a fallen person. I glanced at Astrea and saw her face go serious in an instant. She looked back at me and nodded. We both rushed forwards, and my eyes widened when I found someone familiar nearby, watching them anxiously. Anne? Shirou, and exclaimed when she saw us, distress in her voice. She then started to hobble in a rush in my direction, helped by a wooden crutch. Please, you have to I had started to approach her, trying to make sense of what she was babbling, when she tripped and began to fall. I rushed forward, just barely being able to catch her in my arms before she hit the ground. Anne, what's going on? Are you okay? Anne's arms wrapped tightly around me, and she buried her face on my chest. Please, save Aaron. The adventurers, they, she babbled, and I felt her tears dampening my t-shirt. I looked around, trying to make sense of the situation, and felt a chill go down my spine when I recognized the person in the middle of the guards. It was Ash, her face pale and covered in blood, wounds littering her face and body. One of the guards was desperately pressing a piece of cloth to her right thigh, wincing when the white fabric turned red in an instant. It was a deep cut, enough to threaten her life if left untreated. There were also 2 small arrows embedded on her, one in the back of her right arm and the other in her shoulder. Luckily, she was still conscious. But she was alone, no trace of the other 2 children of Hephaestus with her. What happened? I asked the girl in my arms. Dimly, I noticed the silent healer that treated me rush in between the guards to reach the wounded woman. I looked at Ash. Where's everyone else? And seemed unable to answer, but in her place, the wounded Palom gathered her strength and did so. An ambush. We found their tracks easily and killed some goblins in the way, but it was all a trap. Frustrated tears started to fall from her eyes, and I could feel An's hold on me get tighter. You warned us that they were capable of planning, but Wrath didn't listen. He rushed ahead on his own. He's dead, I think. The hob got him with its axe. She continued with gritted teeth, her voice getting weaker by the moment. The green goblins, they were sent to distract us, while the others surrounded our group. Nobody spoke as she told the harrowing experience. We killed a lot of them, but they whittled us away. Atticus, he lost an arm. One of the brown goblins almost got me, but he covered me and took the attack instead, and told me to run. Didn't want me to get caught, told me to get help. And she did. She ran desperately through the forest, hearing the sounds of battle behind her, and didn't stop, not even when they started to chase her, littering her body with arrows. Incredible. Any would have succumbed to her wounds already, but here she was, alive to tell her story. Was it the fauna? Or was her will that strong? I was amazed by her resilience. It didn't stop the feeling of anger from suffusing my body, though. I might have some unkind thoughts about the dwarf, but he didn't deserve to go like that. No one did. And Atticus. There was a possibility that he was still alive, but it was slim. If his wounds were as serious as Ash told them, then he had little time. I could have prevented this. I should have prevented this. One by one, I started to open my magic circuits. 1, 2, 3, until 10 of them were opened. The mana of the world began to fill most of them, and then there was only heat. Once again, it felt like my blood was fire, heat coursing through my veins as the volatile energy was processed for my use. One of them, however, I began to use to cast a spell with another source of energy. I felt a hand grab my own. Astria was looking at me, her face a mess of emotions I could not fully parse. Fear, resignation, pride. She knew what I was going to do. And my boys? A deep voice spoke. I looked up and saw the guard captain standing to the side, his expression unreadable. You left with 4 guards and returned with none. Where are they? 2. I saw 2 get killed. The other 2 were fighting when I ran. Aaron. Was Aaron killed? And asked, finally detaching herself from me. Her eyes were puffy and red and tears were still falling from her eyes, but she was glaring at Ash. Or was he one of the 2 you left behind? You fucking coward? I heard the words, and I would have intervened if not by the focus I was putting in my circuits. The mana of the world was too powerful, too unstable, for me to do any delicate mysteries with it. I was not capable of controlling it. Reinforcing my body always had an inherent risk of injury. I had to measure the magic energy I used properly. Too little and nothing would happen. Too much and I would break. I manipulated the energy inside of me, my OD, meager as it was, and began to fill the circuit I left empty. Tosaka had taught me how to process mana with my magic circuits to do magecraft, but I had always used OD before I met her. It was weaker, it was lesser, but it was familiar, controllable, usable. The red-haired one, right? Ash spoke faintly. He was alive. I left him too. The last of her strength seemed to leave her at that, and her eyes closed. She wasn't dead. Her breaths were shallow, her skin was pale, but she was still amongst the living. I relaxed. The healer was here. I did not have to leave someone to die to do my duty, and fell to her knees in front of the wounded Palom, and her tears started anew. I looked at Astria, illuminated by the orange glow of the sunset, and let a soft smile appear on my face. I have to go. I whispered. Of course you do. She whispered back, closing her eyes in resignation. I truly have to get used to this again, huh? She mused, a small smile gracing her features. I won't stop you, but promise me you'll come back safely. Astria gave my hand a final squeeze and let go. I almost asked for her blessing once again then and there. Surely the fauna could help me with what I wanted to do, but I didn't. It would feel too much like I was taking advantage of the situation to get what I want. I would fight with my own strength. I promise. I stepped forward, drawing the attention of the captain. Son? What? He began only to trail off when he saw my face. His eyes widened. Are you going? I nodded and kneeled beside Ash. Ash, were we correct yesterday? Did you find them to the west? I asked, ignoring the disapproving looks of the healer. I wondered for a second what was the red liquid she was applying to the wounds. Was that a healing potion? The Palom stirred and her eyes opened a smidgen. Shirou? Ah yes. We didn't find the nest, but They came from that direction. She forced out the words, still looking woozy due to the blood loss. Wah. What are you doing? You shouldn't. Even if we killed a lot of them, the hob's still there. You can't. It's okay. Everything's going to be fine. I answered her with a smile. I'll take care of the goblins and save the others. Her eyes widened and she tried to force herself up, only for the healer to stop her. You hear that, Anne? I'll save your brother, so don't cry anymore. He's going to tease you later if he finds you like that. And let out a confused, huh, before she realized what I was going to do. Wait, fuck that. Don't go. You heard her. And exclaimed as I stood up. There are too many. Shirou. But I didn't stop. I looked to the gate where the guards had formed a line of defense in preparation for a possible attack. They would probably close the gates soon once the captain gave the order, but now there was a human barricade blocking the path. Astria, I told you that there was something more important than money and glory to me, right? I didn't look back, but I felt the goddess' attention on me, the warmth of her divinity caressing my skin. It's a promise I made. I could ask them to move out of the way, surely. But I was in a hurry. Reinforcement, I said while taking a starting stance. I let my magic flow into the imperfections of my legs, my waist and back, filling them little by letting and strengthening the bones, muscles, ligaments, even the skin. I heard some mutters of amazement once the green glow of my magic started to emanate from my body. I took a deep breath and, despite the fact that I was going to fight to the death soon, I smiled. Everything I do, the reason I fight for is that I want to become a hero of justice. My words were soft, but I knew that they would reach my goddess. I ran, dust rising as I rushed forward. Nostalgia filled me for a moment. The setting sun, the magic reinforcing my body, and an obstacle to jump over. Just like that afternoon I spent practicing my magic in school, I leaped, my body twisting as I did so. I swear I could feel the guards' spears grazing me as I passed over them. I was only missing a bar for my high jump. I turned on the air, falling feet first a good distance ahead of the guards, my reinforced body taking impact without problem. Without looking back, I kept running on the direction of the goblin-infested forest. Author's note. I was going to hold off until I posted this one, but I decided to do it today so some questions could be answered. To start off, in my story magic glows because it's cooler that way. I know Avalon is useless without Saber. You don't need to point it out. Wait for one more chapter. I edited some parts on past chapters that some of you rightfully pointed out were wrong, like the fact that Shirou got his circuits open during Day 8 during FateRoute. It didn't change anything in the story, but I edited the initial note anyway, or the projection part at Chapter 1. I thought I had corrected it, but it snuck in after my revision. I edited the rapey goblin in Chapter 2 too. It was meant to show that the monsters gain some natural instincts in the surface and how different they act in comparison to dungeon monsters, and sexuality was the easiest one to show, but it didn't fit the vibe the next chapters have. The scene remains mostly the same, but there are no rape implications. Besides, that difference is shown in this chapter and next more accurately. Cunning and experienced enough to lay ambushes and traps that would surprise adventurers that fight dungeon goblins and win with ease. The adventurers may have killed a lot of them, but the ambush and the numbers was enough to overwhelm them. Surface mons can think, dungeon mons act more stupid on the upper levels. Probably will wait a couple of days to post the next chapter so I can what you guys think about this. Ah, speaking of, sex will be a part of this story. Sorry, I didn't put a warning in the first chap. It will not overshadow everything, but it will be there. See ya. Chapter 5. In the depths of the forest, under the waning rays of the sun, a feast was taking place after a hard-won battle. Food was plentiful and invigorating, but there was no celebratory mood, because the ones partaking on it were beasts. There was no remembrance of the many lost in the battle. There was no pride in the deed they had accomplished. There was no worry of a retaliatory strike. There was only hunger for the flesh and blood in front of them. The Red One, however, looked at its herd consuming the bodies of their latest prey and their fallen brethren and felt different. In its simple, animalistic mind, under layers and layers of hatred and hunger, there was a sliver of worry. Danger was coming, and the herd was weakened. The Red One was weakened, hurt. It's been years since it had been wounded. The herd had grown to its size after years and years of careful hunting, limiting the hunt to when it was necessary, and even so, only to acceptable prey. Not them, never them. Losses were inevitable, their weak nature being hard to overcome as it was, especially when they had to face them. But as long as the Red One lived, the herd knew that it would continue to thrive. It would continue to expand and grow. The brown ones, the ones that had been with the Red One the longest, knew how to fight, how to kill, how to hunt without bringing undue attention. They had learned about the things the Red One knew by following its lead, and had lived time and time again to grow stronger. And, wanting that strength for themselves, others began to follow it as well. The Red One had accepted it, of course. It was natural for the weak to flock to the strong. However, That growth, beneficial to the herd as it was, also brought problems. The bigger herd meant that they needed to hunt more frequently and search for bigger prey. The bigger herd meant that there was a bigger chance of attracting their attention. The bigger the herd, the more green goblins joined it, and the greater the chance of something going wrong. And finally, when the advent of cold days and the need for new prowling grounds with more prey had them move to somewhere else, something had gone wrong. Somewhere, somehow, the red one had made a mistake. Was it the place it had chosen to migrate its herd? It had realized that a gathering of them lived close, but it hadn't cared. They wouldn't know. After all, it knew how to be careful. Was it the fact that it let the younger, the more reckless green ones run free in this forest? They had started to bring more food to its clearing than what it was necessary, but, again, it hadn't cared to stop them. More food was always welcomed, even if the smell attracted carrion. But they took its permission to hunt as permission to attack them. The red one had seethed when it found the bodies of those that had followed it. Not because of a sense of care for its brethren, but because it knew that now they knew of their existence. It had pursued those responsible, but it was too late. By the time it found them, they had already left its territory. It was too much risk to follow them further. The red one hadn't lived for so long for it to ignore that an attack had been on its way after that. And so the herd prepared and fought. They had survived, overcame those that came to hunt them, but the victory had been costly. Even with the advantage in numbers, even after taking them by surprise, its once thriving herd had been decimated. The dead ones would serve as sustenance to the remaining ones, but there was an advantage that numbers brought that had been lost. A growl resonated from its throat when it remembered the man who did most of the damage, the one who had hurt it. It had been fortunate to have wounded the man just as the battle began. Otherwise, the result would have been different. It would have died, instead of just getting a cut on its shoulder. Even so, it hurt like nothing had for the last few years. It raised the blade it had claimed from the strong one, admiring the shiny silver surface. Nothing like the dull gray of the weapon it had used for years. It was a good weapon, but it wouldn't be enough. More would come, in fear, in revenge, and they wouldn't stop until its herd was destroyed. That's what they always did. The growl deepened, making the feasting goblins raise their heads in alarm. The red one ignored them. They had to leave. The red one looked to the side where the old structure they had found in the forest stood. It's where all the food they had gathered in the last few days was piled up, and where the survivors of those who had attacked them were confined in. The strong one should be dead already after the wound he got, but the other two were captured relatively unhurt. They were meant to be their food later when the cold days approached and their prey became scarce, but that wasn't necessary now. The herd was smaller, and gorged as they were with both the hunters and their fallen, there wasn't a need for more food now. They would have to die before they left. The red one stood, intent on finishing the living enemies, when a green one of the remaining lookouts, bursted into their clearing. There were lights coming from the forest. More enemies were approaching. The bellow that came out of its mouth sent the feeding goblins into a frenzy. They grabbed whatever weapon was near them and started to rush out into the forest. The green ones, their numbers not even close to what they were when the herd first came here, went out first. The brown ones were next. Fewer than the fingers the red one had in one hand. But better armed with the weapons they had pilfered from their latest prey, they followed. The red one left last, gripping its new blade tightly, dismissing the defeated enemies it had intended to cull out of its mind. It would observe the situation first. Depending on the number of enemies, it would fight. Or it would run. That's how it had always survived. It was here, I muttered, kneeling on the grassy ground of the forest, the glow of my reinforcement illuminating the area around me until I let it fade away. It hadn't been long after I entered the forest when I found the place the ambush had taken place in. It wasn't exactly easy to miss, after all. The grass that had been flattened to the ground by countless feet, the broken branches hanging off the nearby trees, the blood that, once again, guided me to the aftermath of a goblin attack with its cloying scent. But there was no one in sight. Not even bodies. I was late. I shook my head, dispelling those thoughts. I hadn't expected to come here and find the fight still going. I knew firsthand how quickly a battle can end. It probably hadn't lasted much after Ash had left, if there had been enough free goblins to chase after her. My fists tightened in frustration. In the best-case scenario, the guards had managed to get away from the fight and had hid somewhere in the forest, but life probably wasn't that kind. If the goblins were feeling merciful, they may have been captured, but I had to be prepared for the worst. Either way, I wouldn't know until I found them. An ambush. We found their tracks easily and killed some goblins in the way, but it was all a trap. Or maybe, I considered what I knew of the monsters. Considering the adventurers and the guards had been ambushed here, I knew their hideout had to be close. That's what we had determined yesterday. It had to be close enough to hear the commotion from and being attacked the other day, or to have patrols nearby. I remembered the image of the hobgoblin glaring at us from the forest entrance, close enough for the whole group to pursue us when we left. Maybe it would be easier to let them find me first. Turning their ambush around would let me control the battlefield and avoid being surrounded. But how could I do that? Something flashy enough to catch their attention and bring them to me. My eyes widened when a memory came to me, and I smiled sharply. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, focusing the magic energy rushing inside my circuits. Trace on. It was time to show those monsters how to truly hunt. I sighed and removed my right hand from the now glowing t-shirt, the air I exhaled misting in the cold night. Truly, reinforcement was not subtle at all, especially now that night was falling. The green glow of my magic illuminated the area around me, almost like a beacon lit in the middle of the dark forest. Just what I wanted. I'm ready. There's no turning back. I turned around and rushed to hide at the place I had placed my traced weapons, Sirke's longsword, my bow and some arrows, a few minutes before, knowing that it wouldn't take long for them to notice. My first clue that the beginning of my plan had worked at all was the loud, deep scream coming from deeper into the woods. Then the other shrill yells followed and grew closer and closer, the rushing of bare feet as a background. It wasn't long until 3 snarling green goblins came into view, each holding a crude weapon, making a beeline to the glow of my t-shirt. The t-shirt I was not wearing, of course. I didn't see the faces the goblins made when they found the white and blue shirt hanging from a tree, like the world's most bizarre Christmas light, as I was too busy lifting my bow from my crouched position in the bushes to the side, an arrow ready to shoot. The first arrow pierced through the throat of the goblin nearest to my position. It let out a gurgle of pain as it fell to its knees, letting go of its club to cover the damage with its bony hands, still alive but incapacitated. I knocked another arrow as the other 2 goblins turned in shock at the sudden attack and, meeting the outraged eyes of the monsters, I let go of my bowstring. Thump! The arrow flew true and pierced through the glowing yellow eye of the goblin. Instant death, better than the first one that was still agonizing on the floor. The last goblin tried to rush me, letting out a shrill war cry, its spear raised threateningly, before my arrow pierced through its open maw and out of the base of its skull, more than likely severing the spinal cord as it fell to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. I exhaled, not letting the small victory distract me. 3 down, who knows how many more to come. I laid the bow back on the ground and picked up the longsword. Focusing on my magic energy, I rushed out of my hiding place, going in the opposite direction the goblins came from. I would have taken the bow as well, but I had only so many hands and unfortunately my projections didn't come with sheaths or quivers. Also, I felt much more comfortable fighting with a blade than a bow, and if my suspicions were correct then the others should be. The green goblins, they were sent to distract us, while the others surrounded our group. Once again I heard them before I saw them. The racket they were making made it easy for me to find where they were coming from, like they were guiding me right to them despite the darkness of the forest. Careful as I could despite my rush, I had my magic energy flow from my circuits to my body, leaving a burning trail as it coursed through, reinforcing my physical abilities until I broke into the realm of the supernatural. Just in time too, as just as the spell settled and my whole body was lit in lines of green magical energy, I weaved around a tree and saw them. 4 of them this time, 2 green and 2 brown. They noticed as soon as I did, maybe sooner considering how bright I was shining. They skidded to a halt, their eyes widening in shock, as they were more than likely expecting their allies to be distracting me. The second it took them to realize that their bare-bones plan had not worked was enough for me to, in a burst of magical enhanced speed, cover the distance between us, Sirke's sword ready. Ha! I swung my sword horizontally in a cleaving slash that cut cleanly through one of the goblins, bisecting it with ease. Aided by my reinforced strength, my blade continued unimpeded through the second before the attack was finally stopped by the weapon one of the brown ones held. My eyes narrowed. It was Wrath's warhammer. I saw movement from the corner of my eye and leaped back, avoiding the sword slash from the other brown goblin. Grah! The warhammer goblin followed with a jump of its own, its weapon raised over his head and a ferocious snarl on its face. I took a step to the side and the goblin, not used to the weight of the weapon, couldn't stop in time to avoid hitting the floor with all its strength. Sloppy. I moved even as earth erupted, clouding my vision of the monster for a second. Sirke's long sword whistled through the air, parting the dust cloud, and I struck down the goblin with a meaty thump. I didn't relish on that strike, as the last goblin showed its opportunistic nature by continuing its attack. It let out its best attempt of a war cry and rushed forward, seeking to attack me as I was distracted. I tried to move, only for my eyes to widen when my blade refused to move from its place. I clicked my tongue as I was forced to leave Sirke's long sword behind to evade the goblin's frenzied attack. Luckily, it was predictable. There was not truly any technique behind the goblin's slashes, just an animal pretending to be more by wielding a weapon. Still, animal or not, it was dangerous to face it unarmed. I weaved through its flurry of slashes while walking backwards, waiting for the moment to strike back. which came when it began to wind back its arms for a stronger downward blow. I stopped and focused my magic. Trace on. Usually it would take me a moment to concentrate on a blueprint in my collection and go through the steps to trace it, but when the weapon I intended to copy was just in front of me, it was much easier. Even if I was tracing 2 of them. 8 steps done in an instant in 2 of my circuits. The space in my right and left hands glowed as I settled on a low stance to counter the goblin. My right hand surged upwards, a short sword appearing in its grasp. Ha! Gra! Clang! Twin swords met in the middle, and the metal cried as it tried its best to handle the strength of our strike. The goblin's eyes widened in shock as its sword was repelled by my one-handed slash, the monster having not expected to meet resistance at all. It was left open. Time to finish this, then. My left hand blurred as it moved forward, the silver sheen of the other traced sword reflecting the light from my body's reinforcement as it stabbed deeply into the brown goblin's chest. Thwack clink, and destroyed the magic stone. I let out a breath as the last monster exploded in a burst of black ash. That's the 6th, no, the 7th down. I looked at the goblin that used Wrath's warhammer and confirmed it was dead. It wasn't the beheading strike I had intended. I found out now that the dust had settled. It seemed that aside from having tougher hide, the brown goblin's bones were stronger, as Sir Kay struck the spine but did not manage to cut through entirely. I approached the almost decapitated body and let the 2 short swords I was holding dissolve back into magic energy before, with a grunt of effort, I dislodged the long sword from the dead monster. Dual wielding may have worked well just now, but I preferred using only one sword. It's what I learned from Saber, after all. Letting the magic energy I was using for reinforcement fade from my body, I let out a sigh of relief, a cloud of mist forming from my breath. I was burning. Magi's body temperature always rises whenever we use our magic circuits, so I was somewhat used to the sensation of heat coursing through my body as I used my magecraft. However, this was the first time I used so many spells one after the other since I came to this world. Even if I was mitigating it a little by using my OD to fuel my reinforcement, the amount of mana I used for my projections was taking a toll on my body. My shirt was soaked in sweat, and I could see steam wafting off my body as the heat of my skin met the cold night air. My heart beat like a drum in my chest, trying to keep up with my efforts, and my muscles twitched here and there after being forced to operate far above their limits. I was going to be sore tomorrow. I shook my head. There was no time for me to complain. I had to find the hobgoblin. I turned around, intent on going back to the place I had left my t-shirt hanging at, when a thought crossed my mind. Wrath was from Hephaestus Familia, right? I didn't know the state the dwarf's body would be in, or if I would be able to bring it back to town, but I could give Ash back something from her companion so she could deliver it to their goddess. Something he crafted himself. Jogging back to the place, I fought the first goblins, a long sword in one hand and a warhammer in the other. I thought about my next steps. The goblins that rushed first were the ones that took the most direct path from their hideout to my bait, so if I traced their steps, I would find the others. Easy. Of course, the moment I thought that was the moment I was proven wrong. It was only because it was so silent in the forest that I heard the familiar twang of a bowstring being released. Instantly I jumped to the side, just in time to hear the arrow cutting through the air and embedding itself in a tree behind where I was standing before I moved. A familiar arrow, in fact, now that I got a look at it. It was one of mine. My eyes narrowed. Either they took it from one of the goblins I killed. I looked up, a small figure was standing near the place I was heading to, shadowed by the light my reinforced t-shirt gave out, trying to knock an arrow on a bough that looked comically big for the creature holding it. My bough. Where they found the place I hid my bough and leftover arrows after the ambush. Things like that reminded me that in spite of their humanoid appearance and their basic planning, they were not smart at all. Really, grabbing equipment an enemy left behind not expecting sabotage? I waited until the brown goblin was finishing setting its shot and made the bough disappear with a thought. The goblin almost stumbled, the strength it was using to draw the bough suddenly finding no resistance. It looked at its hands with shock and then at me, who was beginning to glow with my reinforcement, and ran away. My eyes widened. Like I'd let you get away. I grumbled and made to chase it down before Ash's voice in my memories stopped me. But Wrath didn't listen. He rushed ahead on his own. He's dead, I think. The hob got him with its axe. Fucking goblins. They really repeat their plans to the letter every time? Huh? Distracting the attackers with the weak ones, then surround them and box them in or lure them to another ambush by running away. Not this time. I muttered while hefting the weighty warhammer in my left hand over my shoulder. Letting out a grunt of effort, I threw the weapon with all my enhanced strength. Wrath's warhammer spun a few times in the air before it hit the goblin squarely in its back. Crack. I could swear I could hear its ribs breaking with the impact, mostly overshadowed by the scream of pain it let out. It was still alive, even as it fell to the ground, unmoving. Damn resilience these monsters had. I approached with a burst of speed. my blade raised in the air, and finished it off. "Nice shot, Wrath," I muttered. I didn't know the dwarf well, and didn't really like him, but I'm sure he would have appreciated me using his hammer to help me kill one of the monsters that killed him. That much I could offer in his memory. Now, to finish this, once and for all, I looked forward into the dark forest and waited. If I was right, I wasn't shocked by the beastly bellow that came from some distance ahead, in the exact same direction the goblin was running towards. The hob was here, standing at almost 2 meters tall, with broad shoulders, thick arms, and strong legs. The red creature seemed to share little other than its name with its weaker counterparts. Shining yellow eyes glared at me under the black shaggy hair crowning its head. It hated me, I realized once again, and I wouldn't blame it. In the last 2 days, I killed over 10 of its herd, so I'd say I deserve some hatred, but I had the feeling it hated all humans the same. It just had a reason for hating me. It was also wounded, to my surprise. A fairly deep cut on its left shoulder, probably made by the blade it held in its right hand. Atticus' greatsword, wielded like it weighed nothing in its grasp. Adrenaline rushed through me, and I felt my heart rate rise again in preparation for the battle ahead. Only one would leave this forest alive, and I didn't survive the mess that the Holy Grail War had been to die here. I held Sir Kay's longsword in my 2 hands and settled into my stance, feeling the memory of Saber's touch guiding my body. In spite of the fury it emanated from its posture, the red creature walked almost slowly in my direction before stopping. It started to growl, deeper and deeper the more it stood still, like it was forcing itself to do it. I clicked my tongue. Another ambush waiting, probably. If you won't approach, I'll do it myself, even if it's a trap. I took a step forward, then another. On the third, I bursted into movement, raising my sword for a downward strike. I moved at a speed that would normally be impossible for a human to achieve from a stopped start, but the hobgoblin reacted just as quickly. Clang. The sound of steel meeting steel resonated in the dark forest as our blades met. The hobgoblin snarled, its arms trembling in effort as it tried to match my reinforced strength, but my momentum was too much, and it was forced to take a step back. I took a step forward and slashed again. Clang. Again. Clang. And again. Clang. It was after our blades clashed a couple of times that I realized what was happening. It blocked every one of my attacks not because it was skilled, not because it knew how to fight with a sword. If anything, I knew I was better than it. It was just instincts. Animalistic, basic survival instincts that allowed it to use its supernatural speed and strength to react to my attacks and block them just before they connected. The very few that managed to get through its guard slided uselessly against its tough hide, their strength sapped by the block. Still, I didn't stop pressing the advantage I possessed. I took it by surprise with my speed, but it would be a matter of time before it recovered and went on the offensive. I had to end it fast before. Clang. It happened just as the blades clashed once again. I don't truly know if either I saw the edge of a shadow moving, or maybe I noticed a look of satisfaction appear on the hobgoblin. Kiha. Or maybe it was the shrill scream that a brown goblin gave out as it came out of hiding brandishing a spear, but my own survival instincts surfaced at that moment, and my leg lashed out almost without me thinking. Crack. The goblin's chest caved in as my reinforced kick destroyed its ribs, and it could do nothing but tumble to the ground, dying almost instantly. However, I cursed inwardly. The ambush may have failed, but... Grah! The hobgoblin bellowed, pure fury etched on its face, and took advantage of my minimal distraction to go on the offensive. Clang. 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 Now it was me who needed to block the slashes of the monster. I gritted my teeth, my arms shuddering with the force of the frenzied strikes. It took all my strength to block its attacks without my guard breaking. It was wounded, but it didn't seem to affect it. Attack after attack came, and I blocked them all. A cacophony of metal hitting metal filled the dark forest. It was almost overwhelming, the ferocity, the anger, the hate I felt in every blow. Almost. In the midst of the rain of slashes, I just felt infuriated. It was stronger than me, faster than me. It had probably been fighting for more years than I've been alive. So why is that the only word that came to me when I saw how it wielded its pilfered blade was, once again, sloppy? I shouldn't have been able to block the attacks. I shouldn't have been able to even react to them. But here I was, still unhurt after so many blows. Because, again, it was so predictable. Maybe it was the fact that I've seen some of humanity's greatest warriors fight that now seeing that lack of technique almost offended me. Even Berserker had wielded his stone sword axe with more finesse than this. Or it may be what I could read in the weapon. It didn't deserve that blade. The hours of dedication Atticus had put into practicing with that sword, even though his hands were more used to forging than fighting, stood out starkly in my mind. By the way the hobgoblin was attacking with the greatsword, it may as well be a club in its hands in comparison. The axe it had on it the first time I saw it would have been a better choice, considering for how many years it had used the weapon. But I'm guessing the thought process when choosing the better weapon didn't go beyond shiny. Stupid. It might have won against me if not for that, wounded shoulder or not. Instead, it was only those instincts that let its hobgoblin survive this far into the battle, its arms moving before. Its mind caught up. My eyes widened as an idea was born out of that thought. A really stupid idea. I waited until the next space of time between slashes, which there were a lot as its attacks didn't flow together at all, to lash out with my sword. None of the style saber had beaten into me present in the attack, only focusing on speed. And just like I thought, with its sword arm still recovering from its attack, the hobgoblin jumped back to dodge, not realizing that with its tough hide my sloppy slash wouldn't even nick it. It just reacted to movement. Trace on. Once again my eyes followed the blade my enemy was wielding, reading deeper and deeper as I delved into its history in less than a moment. A blade forged by hands that had spent a lifetime honing their skill in the craft, yet used to the strength they now wielded. Numerous mistakes had been made in its construction as the blacksmith misjudged his own strength, but they were expertly corrected one after the other. And then those same hands that existed to create learned how to fight. Hour after hour, Atticus honed his skill, a fervent desire to prove himself worthy to her, the deity who saved him, accepted him, being the only thing occupying his mind. It was devotion. To the forge. To his goddess. And so, devotion he named his creation. The spell was finished at the same time the hobgoblin's feet touched the ground after its jump, and, like a mirage, the silver sheen of Atticus' devotion shone just beside the monster's head. And the hobgoblin moved. It jumped to the side, an alarmed expression on its face, and its blade slashed in a blur, hitting its own copy floating uselessly in the air. It's not like I can shoot them or something, I thought, smiling grimly, as my own burst of speed brought me to my enemy, Sir Kay's sword raised. The hobgoblin's eyes widened and I could see its muscles tensing, intent on dodging, blocking, whatever it could do to survive my incoming attack. But it was too late. It was open. Huh. My sword fell, a streak of silver parting the night air, and struck the hobgoblin on the left shoulder, in the exact same place it was already wounded. It may have an extremely tough hide, but with my enhanced strength, my sword cut its way down through the monster's body unimpeded, crushing the clavicle and ribs, slicing through organs and muscle. It was finally stopped by the bones of its hip, but the damage was done. Blood exploded from the hobgoblin as the left side of its body, shoulder to stomach, peeled away from the rest, only connected by a strip of flesh still attached to the waist. Atticus' blade fell out of its hand, the hobgoblin not having the strength to lift it anymore. It was my victory. Covered in its blood, I kicked the swaying monster on the stomach, dislodging my sword from its bones, and it fell backwards to the ground with a loud and wet thud, unmoving. It was still alive, though. My chest heaved as I tried to supply my lungs the air they demanded. I felt a little lightheaded, a combination of the temperature I was running after overdoing it with my magic and the lack of oxygen. My hands, arms, and shoulders shook and twitched after taking that onslaught of attacks. I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up spraining something, even if their durability had been enhanced by my magic. But that would be something for tomorrow's me to complain about. Now there was stuff I still needed to do. I sighed, looking at the monster as it bled out on the floor. I had to end it, just in case. I took a couple of steps forward and brought my blade down once again, stabbing it deeply into the neck. The hobgoblin's eyes snapped open one last time, looking at me with loathing. It gurgled a wet growl and tried to raise its arm to the blade, but it fell down uselessly. Now, it was dead. Playing possum? Really? I muttered, annoyance dripping from my tone. Ugh, I hope it was the last of them. I'm exhausted. I let out a deep sigh, letting my reinforcement fade, and continued on my way into the dark forest. It wasn't the last of them, as I would soon realize. 2 more goblins tried to ambush me when I was following the path the others took to attack me. I didn't know if they were incredibly loyal or incredibly stupid, as my blade was still dripping the blood of their leader when they found me. Either they were willing to die trying to take revenge for the hobgoblin, or they didn't care that I killed the stronger beast in single combat, and just attacked me without thought. I was leaning towards the second option. They were promptly dispatched even without reinforcement, my sword making short work of them, and I continued on my way, following the smell of rotting animals that was getting stronger and stronger the more I walked through the foliage. I finally found their hideout soon after, a clearing not unlike the one I found a couple of days ago. The only difference being a dilapidated log cabin in the middle of it, and the countless corpses of animals, monsters, and people covering the grass. My stomach churned in disgust, and I had to cover my nose as the sweet, sour smell of decay hit me in the face like a sledgehammer. How could they live like this? I muttered as I entered the clearing. I looked around, trying to see if there was any movement, but nothing. No guards, no Aaron, no Atticus. Or if they were around, they were not in a state I would recognize them in. Everything and everyone here was dead, and I could see the remains of armor and weapons strewn around the place. I grimaced. Was I too late? Should I have accompanied them? Or would I have suffered the same fate had I faced the numbers the herd had before it was culled by the group that came before? Ash telling me of the way they fought let me prepare for them beforehand. Would I have done as well if not for that? I'd never know. But I just hoped I could find a silver lining in this terrible situation. The cabin. It was the only place left to check. Maybe it had once belonged to a hunter or a logger. Whatever the case, it had seen better days. I approached the lone building, trying to ignore how my shoes squelched when I stepped over the decaying remains of multiple creatures, my sword ready for more ambushes. The door of the cabin was blocked from the outside, pieces of wooden furniture piled up in front of it, barring it. Like the goblins wanted to lock something, or someone, inside. Aaron, Atticus, are you inside? I asked, hoping beyond hope that a miracle would happen. And my hopes were answered. That voice, brat, Shirou, is that you? Aaron's voice called from the inside, and I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. Wait, are you serious? There's someone here? I heard another man's voice ask, disbelief in his tone. Yes, it's me. Are you okay? Wait just a second. I'm going to open the door. I started to remove the stuff covering the door as fast as I could. How many are there aside from you? Are you hurt? The relief I felt was staggering. I made it. I kept my word to Anne. Her brother was all right. Just Marco and that adventurer guy. Marco's fine other than his busted leg, but the other guy. The adventurer lost a fuckton of blood. We managed to stop the bleeding, but he's pale as a ghost. My pace increased at those words. Atticus was still alive, but in danger. I cursed my rush to get here. I should have asked the healer for a potion or something. And you? You all right, Aaron? I'm fine. Just got the shit beaten out of me. Fucking goblins. They were fucking everywhere. I almost snorted at the levity. He truly was Anne's brother. Come on, man. Hurry up. Don't know how you got here, but you were lucky the hobgoblin wasn't around. Just a little more. The door was almost unblocked. There. We need to leave before it comes back. Aaron's voice trailed off when I opened the door, and he got a good look at my blood-covered appearance. His green eyes widened, or rather his eye, as one of them was so swollen it was almost shut, and he looked at me up and down, his focus ending up in my battered, bloody sword. Holy shit. Another voice said, Marco, I guessed, and I followed it to find a man in his 20s, brown hair and eyes, pretty unremarkable aside from his guard's armor. He was sitting against a wall, his left extended, and bruises covered his face. He, too, was looking at me in shock. Looking back at Aaron, I smiled and tried to reassure him. That's fine. I killed the hobgoblin, and I think I got most of the other goblins. Although, I wouldn't be surprised if some got away after hiding. I grumbled the last part, while looking Aaron over. Aside from the face, he looked healthy enough, though he seemed to be holding his left arm gingerly with his right. A fracture, maybe? Aaron barked out an hysterical laugh at my words. You serious, man? I nodded. Those are the best news I've heard today. But, fucking hell, brat. You bathed in its blood or something? Not by choice. I muttered, my nose wrinkling because of the stench coming from the inside of the cabin. I guess I know where all those animals I couldn't find the other day went to. What a waste of life. I looked around, ignoring the animal carcasses piled up in the otherwise empty room, and finally found Atticus laid on the ground, unconscious. I already knew about the right arm from Ash's story, missing from a little above the elbow. Luckily, and incredibly, the bleeding had been stopped by a makeshift tourniquet, but adding to that, his face was a mess of blood and bruises, swollen almost beyond recognition. I couldn't really tell if he had any broken bones in his body without a closer look, but the fingers on his left hand were an ugly purple color, mangled and twisted. He was still breathing shallowly, but I didn't know for much longer. We had to leave now if there was to be any hope of him living. Come on, we have to go back to the town. I left in a rush, so I don't know if there is any help coming. Wait, did you just say you killed all the goblins? And the hob? How? The other man asked, but I didn't really have time to answer questions. I kneeled in front of Atticus and lifted the taller man over my shoulders with a grunt of effort. Back in my world, I think this was called a fireman's carry. I was unsure how safe it would be to carry him like this while wounded, but I trusted the resilience his blessing granted him to see him through. Ash had survived a crippling blow to the leg and multiple arrow wounds thanks to it. Come on, man. Leave the questions for later. He's the one that saved Annie. I trust his word. Aaron said, approaching his companion. So that's the guy she keeps talking about. I expected him to be taller, the way Little Red described him. Marco muttered. Here, grab my shoe. The other shoulder. You fuck? That arm's broken. We hobbled out of the cabin and followed the path back to the entrance of the forest, retracing my steps while trying to keep a fast pace. or as much as we could, as the weight on my shoulders and the wounds the guards had accrued slowed us considerably. In the meantime, I tried to ignore the path of literal death I had left in my wake. I could feel the scrutiny of the other two as we found the dead monsters on our way, and the shock when we found the bisected hobgoblin. Marco, remind me of this if the brat ever decides to get together with my Annie. In my anger, I'd probably forget and try to scare him off or something, and I don't want to fucking die. Aaron muttered, his face pale. Huh. Of course that girl would get the hots for a man stronger than you. That's what you get for intimidating all the kids from town. Shut it. If they get scared by some threats, then they don't deserve her. The overprotective brother replied, and I tried to ignore the byplay. Nothing would happen with Anne. Anyway, I would leave this town soon, hopefully with Astria's blessing on me. I needed to get stronger. It was only thanks to a series of coincidences that I survived today unscathed. If something like this were to happen again, I would not be able to do anything without assistance. I needed to go to Orario. We continued our walk, and I was broken out of my thoughts a few minutes later by the stirring of the man on my shoulders. I looked to the side and met the barely open eyes of Atticus. Where? What's going on? He muttered, his words slurring. Recognition filled his eyes after a second. You, Shirou? Hey, how are you feeling? Stupid question. Don't worry, we're on our way back to town. The healer will get you back on your feet. I babbled, not slowing my pace. We were about to reach the forest entrance, then it was just a straight path to town. He looked around as best as he could, his eyes cloudy with exhaustion. Ash? He asked. She's fine. Managed to get away and reach town for help. She was being treated when I left. Atticus slumped, relief clear on his body language, before stiffening up in alarm. The hob, dangerous. He gritted out just as we passed the tree line and stepped into the grassy fields. Finally out of the damn forest. I finished it off. The wound you gave it helped a lot. I smiled, before letting a grimace appear on my face. Sorry, had to leave your weapon behind. Devotion's a nice sword, but it's kind of heavy. Heh, that's fine. He muttered, his eyes closing, a small smile on his face. So, you've killed it. Ash was right. Should have brought you in the first place, Atticus said, before his breath deepened and he fell back into unconsciousness. The first thing on his mind after waking up was the safety of his companion and then a warning for our safety. I like this guy. Well, isn't that a nice welcoming party? Aaron's words mirrored my thoughts when, upon arriving back to town, we were met by what seemed to be the whole town getting ready for war. Men and women of all ages wielding axes, pickaxes, hoes and scythes, and all sorts of makeshift weapons were standing in front of the gates behind the fully armored guards. They were either expecting the herd to attack them, or they were about to go kill them themselves. My shoulders slumped a bit, a defeated smile on my face. Had I waited, I would have a lot more assistance in cleaning up the monsters in the forest. Well, it's not like I regret it. Maybe more would have died if so many people tried to join me. Better to have wasted their time getting ready for a fight that would never happen. The group seemed to have noticed at the same time because a cacophony of voices raised up. They're back. Amazing, they got away. Marco, you fuck. You almost died without paying your tab. Was that the nice innkeeper? Open up. We need a healer. And, hurry up. Your man brought your brother back. Shut it, old man, and get out of the way. I want to see them. Oi, fucking open up already. Let them pass. With that colorful commentary, the group of people parted like the Red Seas, and some individuals stepped out of the mass of people. The guard captain walked forward. The serious expression he was wearing could not hide the relief shining from his eyes, followed by the silent healer carrying a satchel, her placid smile not present as she hurried forward, two men with a stretcher with her. Just after them, her speed nothing to scoff at, even if she was still hobbling with a crutch, and rushed, a bright grin on her face. But my attention was stuck on the woman walking behind all of them, her immaculate white dress seemingly shining in the moonlight. I met the indigo blue eyes of, hopefully, my goddess and felt warmth fill my chest at the pride in them. I did it. I saved them, just like I said I would. I didn't do it just for that, but I hoped I proved myself to her. My strength, my determination, my justice. I wanted Astria to see them. I lowered myself to my knees and let Atticus down gently to my side so he could be treated by the healer. The silent woman arrived and started to inspect the unconscious blonde man, retrieving stuff from her satchel. The men accompanying her set the stretcher on the ground and faced me. Anything we should know before we take him? Has he been unconscious the whole time? He woke up for a bit while we were walking here, and he seemed to recognize what was happening. Don't know if that helps any. The man nodded, and I hesitated, trying to think of anything else. The place he was placed after he was captured was filled with rotten animals. There were a lot of flies flying around. The three grimaced and finished placing Atticus on the stretcher. And you? Are you wounded? No, I wasn't hurt at all. I feel a little tender, but that's on me. Went a little overboard. The silent healer raised her face from her treatment and narrowed her eyes at me. I'll be sure to go by the guard station for a checkup later, just in case. She nodded, satisfied, and the 3-4, if Atticus counted, left just as fast as they came. I did all that I could, but the rest would be on their hands. You're back. I was so worried. I looked up, happy for Anne's relief at seeing her brother. Aaron smiled, brightly letting go of Marco. Careful, you asshole. Leaving him to the care of other guards and stepped forward, opening his arms widely, even the broken one, to receive his little sister's hug, only for her to pass by his side, ignoring him completely, and run straight to me. Whoa, Anne. I tried to stand up and brace myself, but it seemed like my legs decided it was time for a rest and refused to move. Oof. And glomped me, for a lack of a better word, and I blame Fujine for having that word in my vocabulary, forcing the air out of my lungs. Haha, you're amazing. You saved them, Shirou, and laughed happily, lifting her face from my chest after her attack. Did you get it? You killed it, right? She asked, looking up with stars in her eyes. I looked away, a little flustered at her closeness. We were both on the ground. I was on my, but after being pushed by the redhead who was almost sitting on me, her hands on my shoulders. The hobgoblin? I asked, and felt her nod. Yeah, it was already wounded, so I just finished it off. I scratched my cheek a little, feeling a little awkward about the attention. Heh, I knew you would. Really, it's like you came out of a damn story. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders and hugged me tightly, burying her face on the crook on my neck. Once more I felt hot all over, and my heart started to beat like crazy. This time it wasn't because of my magic, though. Thank you so much. You saved me the other day, and then went on and saved my brother. You're really my hero. My eyes widened, and a shuddering breath escaped me. My hands were shaking a little as they raised and enveloped the girl, hugging the stuffing out of me. I told you before, don't mention it. I smiled softly, warmth suffusing my being. I was just at the right place to do something. And giggled. Dude, you were here and ran all the way to the forest to save Aaron. Don't try to downplay it. Take the damn praise, hero. She looked up smirking before lowering her voice to a whisper. Hey, is that idiot still frozen there? I looked up and grinned at seeing the still frozen Aaron with his arms opened. In the exact same position. You're cruel. I'm beginning to feel bad for him, you know? And snorted. That's what he gets for going off and almost getting killed like an idiot. She grumbled. And then he got you in danger as well, because you can't seem to fucking help yourself when it comes to saving people. Hey, that's kinda rude. It was true as well, but I didn't say it. Besides, it's not like it was his fault. He just was accompanying the adventurers. PFT, he volunteered because he was angry that I got hurt. Stupid. Come on, look at him. He looks pitiful. Weren't you the one that was crying because he was in danger? I grinned when and flushed at my words, but then she slapped my back a couple times in response. Ow, don't do that. I'm tender all over. The hits were weak, but now that I relaxed I felt like I pulled every muscle in my body. Shut it, hero. You better not tell him I cried like a little girl. He would be insufferable. She then sighed. Ugh, but you're right. I better go with him before he starts to cry himself or something. She unwrapped herself from me and started to stand up before she seemed to get an idea, and grinned and looked at me with a glint in her eye. Before I could react, she quickly kissed me on the cheek. Mwah, yuck. I shouldn't have done that when you were covered in blood. She giggled, a cheeky smile on her flushed face. See you later, hero. She quickly stood up and left, leaving me dumbfounded. I pressed a hand to my cheek and felt heat rush to my cheeks. She was just thanking you, Shirou. Don't read too much into it. I tried to convince myself, but I wasn't so gullible, unfortunately. I then felt a stab of guilt. Did I even tell her I planned to leave? Was I leading her on? Oh my, that's such a complicated expression after receiving a maiden's favor. Are you all right, Shirou? Astria said, approaching me with an amused smile. Ah, Astria, you saw that, huh? I asked, looking up at her figure framed by the moon. You could say that. Enjoying your reward from your adventure? She asked mischievously. Yet you seem troubled. Is she not the kind of girl you like? Please, Astria, don't tease me. I groaned, and the goddess just giggled at my suffering. It's just that. I don't want to end up hurting her later if she's serious about this. I'm planning to leave, after all. Ah, right. Fufu, you're a kind boy, aren't you, Shirou? Most would have taken advantage of her feelings. She mused warmly. But, as interested in it as I am, how about we leave your love life for later? I think there are other things we need to talk about now. Don't you agree, my hero of justice? I felt my cheeks heat up by the way she called me. God, how embarrassing. I just said it in the spur of the moment. I want to be a hero of justice, and did it with a straight face. But now I realize how childish I must have sounded. But in Astria's lips, the words didn't seem mocking. She said the words warmly, lovingly, and I couldn't say I disliked it. Yeah, I think I do. I agreed after a moment. Maybe we should go back to the inn? I need a bath and some food before anything else can happen. I smiled tiredly. Astria giggled again. Yes, you do. What did that girl say? Yuck. I groaned again. Come on, I'll lend you my shoulder. Let's go back. I stood up with Astria's help and started my long way back to the inn. Well, it wasn't that long, but my legs started to feel like noodles once I relaxed, so it felt that way. Astria perked up a moment later, and I looked at her curiously. I forgot to say it. How rude of me. She turned around and placed a hand on my cheek, her blue eyes shining with care. Welcome back, Shirou. I'm glad you're safe. My eyes widened, before a soft smile bloomed on my face. I'm back, Astria. Of course, it wasn't until almost an hour later when we finally managed to reach the inn. It seemed that all the people gathered were feeling far from offended at having missed the fight. I was showered with praise and kind words, and more slaps on the back than I've received in my whole life before. I would more than likely have a hand-shaped bruise there tomorrow. And questions, lots and lots of questions. Everyone wanted to know what transpired in the forest, and had to tell the story multiple times until they were satisfied, and then I had to tell it again to the guard captain who wanted to know what to expect when his men went to the forest for cleanup. I, for my part, asked him if he could bring back the adventurer's weapons I left near the hobgoblin, and he agreed to have some of the men look for them. Luckily, Astria didn't seem to mind the wait, as she just stood at my side, lending me her shoulder and observing everything proudly. But eventually, the group started to disperse, and we were allowed to continue our way to the inn. Of course, many of those that dispersed did so to go get a drink at the inn. So when we arrived, we found a party going on. Declining the few invitations we got to join the merriment, and ignoring the few wolf whistles when we left together, Astria and I retired to the second floor for our talk. Well, I first went to my room to get cleaned up and change my clothes. And so, I found myself standing in front of Astria's door, freshly traced clothes on me, and my heart hammering in my chest. I knocked. Astria, it's me. It's open, Shirou. I entered the room and found Astria sitting at the small table near the window, a cup of steaming tea in her hand. There was a teapot and another cup on the table and a small plate with toasted bread on it. The owner's wife was kind enough to procure this for us when I asked for a refreshment. She then giggled. The innkeeper was too much focused on the bar, and I felt that alcohol would not be conducive to our business, as it were. Astria waved her hand to the other chair. Have a seat and help yourself. It'll warm you up. I took a seat and filled my cup with the steaming tea. I lifted the cup and inhaled the sweet herbal scent with closed eyes. Then I took a sip and let out a groan when the hot liquid traveled down to my stomach, warmth spreading inside my now cold body. Astria smiled at me, amused by my over-the-top reaction. You like it? She asked after a second. It's good. I'm more partial to green tea, but sometimes it's nice to taste new flavors. It's quite sweet. Did you add something to it? Just a dash of honey. I don't particularly enjoy bitterness, she added, seeming a little embarrassed. Quite childish for a goddess, don't you think? Something to remember for later. Not really, I said, shrugging. It fits you, I think. Aren't you the goddess of purity? I joked, grinning when my words brought a pout to her face. You're teasing me. Maybe a little. We enjoyed a little more of our late-night tea in comfortable silence, ignoring the elephant in the room for just a little more. But soon enough, the clink of my teacup being placed on the table brought an end to our distractions. I took a deep breath and looked at the goddess. So, I began, looking for my words and coming out empty. So? Astria asked, mischief in her eyes. She's going to make me say it again. Merciless woman. I grumbled internally. My eyes narrowed, but Astria smiled innocently, waiting for my words. And I didn't come this far by being a coward. Time to bite the bullet. Goddess Astria, please grant me your blessing and make me a member of your familia. I said begged, my eyes not leaving hers. A second passed, Astria's smile widened. My hands began to shake a little. Okay. My breath hitched, my eyes widened. Okay. I asked. Yes, silly. She giggled. Okay, I'll give you a falna. You're going to be one of my children. She tilted her head, amused by my disbelieving expression. What? You thought I would reject you? After what you've shown me today? No. I'm just in disbelief. I hoped, but I wasn't sure you'd agreed after everything that happened to you. I slumped, relief filling me. She accepted me. I admit that it's a little hard to start anew without my girls by my side, but I'm willing to try with you, she said, before smiling brightly. And I think it's time I went back to Orario. I want to see Ryu, and what better reason to have than to do it to introduce you too? I smiled back and nodded, but Astria then grew serious. I might have a few more questions I'd like to ask you, but I think those can wait, so, shall we? I took a deep breath and stood up. No better time than the present. I agreed. What do I need to do? I need access to your back, so take off your shirt and lay face down on the bed. I'll do the rest. I tried to not feel self-conscious as I removed my shirt and exposed myself to the beautiful goddess in front of me, which was a little hard as I could feel her blue eyes roam my body with more than a little curiosity. Might be because she only had girls joining her before. But still, even if she was the goddess of purity, it couldn't be the first time she saw a shirtless man, right? I got goosebumps as my skin was exposed to the cold air, and I shook my head, ridding myself of stupid thoughts. I turned around and laid on the white covers of her bed, a light floral scent, lavender, or something similar, invading my senses as my face met her pillow. I almost jumped, the nice smell having relaxed me a little, when I felt a weight settle on the bed on one side of my waist. Then the other one. She's straddling me. I realized. Well, not quite. She wasn't sitting on me, just hovering over my waist, while carefully avoiding touching me with her legs. But she was really close. I turned my head, just as a warm touch on my lower back sent a shiver down my body. The touch, her hand, slided upwards, following the path of my spine until it stopped in the middle of my shoulder blades, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. I swallowed, my throat dry. Astria? I asked, my face burning. I'm sorry. She apologized, but her touch didn't stop. She went one side, caressing my right shoulder, then the other. Boys really do have wide backs, huh? She wondered almost innocently, but there was an edge of mischief in her tone. She was enjoying this. I was just imagining my wings on you. Your wings. It wasn't the first time she had used that phrase, I noticed, but I never asked. It's my symbol, you could say. The fauna on your back is a list of your characteristics. Everything from your basic abilities and your skills is written in there. She explained. It's dangerous information to leave out in the open, so we gods use a symbol to cover it. Mine is a sword with wings growing out of its guard. The sword and the wings of justice, my girls called it. A sword of justice, huh? Seems fitting. Now, I know you are sensitive to this, but it will be just a moment. I was about to ask what she meant, when Astria let loose the constraints on her divinity, flooding the room with her essence. Shirou Amiya, she intoned, her voice sending not-so-pleasant shivers down my spine. It is my wish that the strength given to you by my blessing helps you achieve your dreams. Accept my ichor and become my child. I looked back and saw Astria prick her right index finger with a needle. Only, instead of red, the blood coming out of her was a shiny golden color. Ichor, she called it, the blood of the gods in Greek mythology. The drop of divine essence swelled until it dropped by its own weight. Only one drop. The moment it touched my back, I felt it down to my soul. I was changed. It was so subtle, I'm not sure I would have felt it, if not by how thoroughly I knew my body due to my reinforcement. Small, almost microscopic, changes occurred all over my body. Muscles swelled and then compressed. My bones became slightly denser. My skin became tougher. My eyes, my brain, my organs, my magic circuits. All of that changed in indescribable ways. Everything was improved. I was not fully human, not anymore. I became more. I could feel it, deep in my soul, a drop of divinity. Her drop, now mine. Ours. But all of that was overshadowed by what I felt stirring deep in my body, like a dragon awakening from its deep slumber. Avalon. I could feel Avalon. Fufu, congratulations, Shirou. Astria's voice brought me back to reality. I felt her hands, both of them now, caressing my back. It felt like she was writing something. Amazing, you have 2 skills right from the start. Skills? What do you mean? Well, some events in an adventurer's life are so significant for them that they leave a mark on their soul. The fauna brings that to the surface, and it uses them to empower the user. You, my hero, have 2 of them. I look forward to hearing their story. It seems you've been holding back on me. I heard the rustling of paper from behind, before Astria pressed something on my back. This is so you can read your status as well, she added, and then lifted herself off my back. Here, take a look. I took the sheet of paper she offered and sat up, trying to ignore the way Astria pressed herself against my back to read over my shoulder. Name, Shirou Amiya. Level 1. STR, I0. End, I0. Dex, I0. AGI, I0. Mag, I0. Magic. Skills. Hashes of a beautiful dream. Temporary status boost when defending or saving others. Cannot be charmed to harm others. Pursuit of an ever-distant utopia. Can use own magic energy to activate the healing factor from Sheath of Avalon. Can use own magic energy to activate Avalon's absolute defense. Huh. Welcome to my familia, Shirou, Astria said, her soft voice a mixture of happiness and sadness. Once again, I promise that I will do my best to support you so you can reach your dreams. Your utopia. I let out a shuddering breath, my mind a jumble of conflicting thoughts. To think that I would be able to use the memento saber left behind for me. The only thing, besides my swordsmanship and my memories, that I have of saber in this world. If only for that, I would be forever indebted to Astria. I smiled, meeting the indigo blue eyes of, now, officially, my goddess. Thank you for having me, Astria. I'm not going to disappoint you. That, I swear by the sword and the wings of justice. Here you have Chapter 5. Next one will be the end of this introductory arc, and we'll be going to Orario by Chapter 7. Look forward to it. In my story, at least, Shirou considers Saber dead. She returned to her time and died in Camlin. He knows she's in Avalon, so his intention is to live a life that would make Saber proud, following his ideals until the day he dies, and hopefully he will get to rest in Avalon with her. That's my take on the whole endlessly searching thing. Saber, or Naceverse characters, for that matter, will not appear in this story. Shirou will not be physically searching for Avalon. He wants to reach it with his deeds. Chapter 6. I inhaled deeply, the air of the morning filling my lungs, bringing with it the scent of the dew-covered grass and soil, and then I exhaled, my warm breath visible when it met the cold day. Winter was coming, I already knew that, but it was at these times of the day before the sun was fully out that it became obvious. Last night when I went to bed, I expected to oversleep after all the events during the evening, but it seemed that some habits were hard to break, even across dimensions. Despite the few hours of rest I managed to get, I woke up bright and early, energy suffusing my body. I'm guessing it had to do less with me, though, and more with the divine blood running in my veins. After the party yesterday, it seemed that everyone else was having a late morning, as the lounge of the inn had been deserted. In the end, instead of being a bother this early by asking for breakfast, I decided to go outside and make my blood flow a little. I rolled my shoulders, then I crossed one arm in front of my chest and stretched. The slight pain I felt after I overdid it with my reinforcement yesterday, not even drawing a wince from me. The endurance stat at work, maybe? I was still coming to sorts with the multiple improvements Astria's blessing had given me. I wanted to test and see how much my body had changed as soon as possible. I was used to my physical capabilities rising with my reinforcement, but this was permanent. My new normal. I had to know my limits. Still, I thought as I stretched the other arm, training with my body like this might not be the best idea. Normally it could take me a few days to recuperate from this kind of damage. I wasn't really hurt, but if I had to describe it, it just felt like I went a little hard with exercise without proper preparation. It would be easy to ignore the pain and go through my training, and it wouldn't be the first time I did that, but it would only delay my healing. Fortunately, there was something I could use to help with that. Avalon. With the strike of the hammer of a gun, my magic circuits opened. I started with one, focusing on my OD dash. Did my reserves of OD grow as well? And filling until it was full of magical energy. Then I just had to fuel Avalon. Finding where on my body I should send the magical energy to do it, though, was both complex and simple. There wasn't an exact place I could point and say there's Avalon, as the sheath was disassembled all over my body, in every bone, every muscle, every cell. If it wasn't for the skill my Falna gave me, it would be impossible to tell where I ended and where the sheath started. But I could feel it now, the blessing on my back warming up as magic trickled into my body. So, simple because there wasn't a part of me that wasn't Avalon but complex because I had to spread my magic energy all over my body to properly fuel it. Just one circuit wouldn't cut it, I soon realized. It was too widespread. The magic energy went everywhere it could, and I could feel the sheath absorbing it greedily, but it needed more. I tried with 2, then 5, 10. Still not enough. Screw it, let's go all in. 27 mystical channels opened and the mana in the air rushed inwards. My reserves might have grown, but they were nowhere enough for constantly filling all my circuits. I needed the mana. I braced myself for the pain and it didn't come. The rush of fire in my veins was just heat now. It was still uncomfortable and it was growing hotter and hotter the more mana entered my circuits, but I could handle it much better than before. Then, like a click, I felt it. Relief rushed through my body as the familiar sensation of Avalon treating my injuries became apparent. Golden glow started to emanate from me, and I couldn't help but imagine for a moment that Artoria was back at my side. Stupid, I know. I smiled wryly when the glow faded in just a couple of seconds, making me realize that using what could be the greatest healing artifact from my world for treating just overused muscles and some bruising was, well, overkill. Turning off all but one of my circuits, I moved my arms, shoulders, and waist, even jumped a little in place. No pain at all. Perfect as always. I smiled and extended one hand. Trace on. In what was becoming a familiar sight, Sir Kay's long sword appeared in my hand. It's been some days since I actually trained my blade work, and what better time to pick it up again but when I got such a massive physical improvement. I didn't know if it was the sensation of Avalon healing me just now, but as I readied my weapon, I was brought back to the first day that Saber trained me in my dojo back home. So, in short, we're just going to fight? Yes, that is it, Master. No stopping our hits, and let us fight as if trying to kill each other. I copy the stance of the ghost in my mind and feel another wry smile on my face. Let me see. I believe you will understand what it is like in about an hour. An hour, huh? I don't think I lasted that much before I first fainted. Let me show you how much I've grown, Saber. I rushed forward, my sword low, just as the woman in my memories raised her shurnai for a strike. Of course, not even the blessing of a goddess would let me picture myself winning against the King of Knights. But I'd try my best, anyway. She'd expect nothing less than that from me. I felt the sun hit my back as my blade danced from slash to slash, parting the morning mist with ruthless efficiency. I chained attacks following the memories of the woman I loved and of her brother, the owner of the blade I was using. Their styles were extremely similar, having been taught the basics from their father, Sir Ector, but it was because of that the differences they had were more apparent. Saber's was beauty and simplicity. There were no extra flourishes, no flamboyant posturing. Every move, every shift of the blade, was accounted for and necessary. Efficient in a way I could not reproduce without her years of experience and her prodigious instincts. Just trying to imitate her was the best I could do. Kay was a little more boastful, fighting in a way that used his height and strength to overwhelm his opponents instead of his technique. Nothing too surprising, considering I was using the blade he wielded as a teenager. Of course, that's not to say that Saber was without physical strength, but that's something she drew from her magic core and mana bursts, not her body. I had to strike a nice medium between the two. The way Kay positioned his body to account for his height and more muscular physique and Saber's brutal efficiency and technique. Easy to say, hard to put in practice. You could say I was developing my own style, a bastardized amalgamation of the two. A copy. Fitting, considering the magecraft I specialized in. I stepped forward, my sword parting invisible enemies, my arms beginning to burn with exertion, and my breath getting faster, and I almost shook my head in amazement. More than an hour of constant sword fighting, and I was just starting to get tired. The fauna was ridiculous. My swings grew in intensity, reaching speeds that the me from yesterday would not have been able to achieve without reinforcement. It wasn't just strength or speed, but I felt more limber, more aware of my own body. I had struggled a little at first, overextending my strikes and missing my steps in between slashes, but now that I've grown used to the changes, I felt more in control of my movements than I ever was. Incredible. That should be about it, I guess. Time to finish. I wanted to meet with my goddess and discuss our steps from here on. Over breakfast would be ideal. Shame I haven't had the chance to cook for her yet. But first, just one more attack. I took another step forward, or a stomp, rather, considering the strength I put on the movement, tensing my legs, waist, back, shoulders, and arms as I brought my sword downwards in a strike reminiscent of the one that ended the fight with the hobgoblin yesterday. My sword was a streak of silver as it cut through the wind, stopping a few inches away from the grassy ground. This time I did shake my head at the burst of wind that the strength of my swing caused. Even without using magic, truly ridiculous. I stood in place, getting my breath under control, when the sound of someone approaching made me turn. "Oh my, you look like you were having fun, Shirou," Astria said, standing near the inn's entrance, a smile on her face. "Astria, good morning." I let my long sword fade away and started approaching before I stopped, a thought coming to me. Should I be calling you Lady Astria instead now? I scratched the back of my head wryly. That's what Hephaestus Familia members called their goddess, right? Mao, why would I want you to be less familiar with me after you became my child? You are making me feel lonely, you know? We are family now. She pouted. Sorry. I just don't know how these things work, or how I should act now that I'm in your familia. I replied. She tilted her head and closed the distance between us. I'd actually prefer it if you kept acting the same. Astria said softly, grabbing my right hand with both of hers. I know that I became your goddess, but I want to keep being your friend as well. Would that be okay with you? I smiled, feeling myself relax with her words. Of course that's okay. Let's continue to get along then, Astria. Great. So, are you done with your training? I nodded. Then would you like to have breakfast with me? We need to talk about our plans going forward, I think. Right. I've had the same thought. Actually, shall we, then? I smiled and pointed with my free hand to the door of the inn. Astria shifted her hands and took the chance to hug my arm to her chest. We shall. And then she pulled me forward. I better get used to this. I thought wryly, following the goddess to our table. Astria had avoided acting so close to me after the first night, but it seemed that her reservations had lessened a little now that I was her child. For some reason, that didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. 2 days. We decided to leave for Orario in 2 days. Enough for us to put any affair we had in the town in order. Or rather for me to do it, as Astria had only intended to stay here for a night before continuing on her way to Zollingen. The fact that she stayed here for so long was only because she had been curious about me. Me, on the other hand, had some people I wanted to at least say goodbye to. One of them, coincidentally, invited me for a talk after I finished my breakfast with Astria. I looked at the small pile of coins on the desk and back at the bearded face of the guard captain. "This is yours, son," the guard captain said, pointing at the money with his bearded chin. 1,400 for the green goblin stones, 800 for the brown ones, and another 800 for the hobgoblin, making it an even 3,000 valley for them all. Then he put another pile beside the first. 5,000 for completing the quest, in the place of the adventurers. And another 5,000 for saving my boys. "Captain, I didn't do it for the money." I grimaced, not comfortable with the situation I was put in again. The first time I accepted, but now? I can accept the money from the stones, but other than that, I can't accept that. The captain sighed exasperatedly. "Look, boy, you're young, so maybe you don't know this, but when you are being paid for a job well done, you just shut up and accept with a smile. Hell, you ask for more. You want more? And even 15,000? Or maybe 20? Man, you're twisting my arm here." He needled, his grin getting wider and wider. Okay, I'll take it. Better to shut up and take it before he starts adding coins to the pile. I sighed. Was it stupid of me? I knew I needed money now that I was going to Orario, but accepting all of this after all the pain and death seemed wrong. The captain seemed to notice my discomfort and hummed, his expression contemplative. "Look, kid, you are a good, selfless guy, and I'm guessing you hadn't had troubles with money before coming here?" I sighed, nodding. "Maybe you are a disinherited noble or something, and I don't really care. But in the real world, money makes things easier to understand." He crossed his arms over his chest. "You coming here and solving our problems without accepting payment? If you weren't so easy to read, then it wouldn't look noble, it would look suspicious. Is that how it is? I just wanted to help, nothing more than that." I replied. "That's what I always did. Something broke in school? I could easily fix it. No need for payment for something so simple. Someone needed a hand cleaning the classroom? It's not like there was someone waiting for me at home most days. I could spare an hour. It gave me a weird reputation in school, but I didn't care as long as I felt I was helping. Not like popularity was important to me." Issei used to complain about my attitude sometimes. But if there was someone who understood doing selfless actions not expecting rewards, it was the child of a monk. And I get that, but do it for the peace of mind of those you help. Maybe some would love the fact that there is an outsider willing to do the right thing. But most people from small towns would wonder what your aim is if not money. Accept payment, even as a gesture. Well, maybe things are different here. If me rejecting money would cause worry to people who don't know me, then it would be better if I just accepted it quietly. Oh, maybe I could give some back to help the fami. And before you bring up something insulting like donating some for the families of the dead, don't worry. I have it handled. I won't let them suffer more for my mistakes. Maybe I really was easy to read. You're a good man, Captain. I settled for saying, a wry smile on my face. Well, if that was all. Just one more thing, he said. Want to work for me, kid? The payment might not be great, but I can talk with the town head and have him give you one of the empty houses around here. The guys will love having someone like you to watch their backs. What do you say? Sorry, but I don't plan to stay here much longer. Unwittingly, I felt a smile come to my face. A goddess gave me her blessing, so? Orario, huh? The captain said, before clicking his tongue. Damn, so you got nabbed before I could even ask. Well, I can't blame you for that. He then smiled. I can see you going far as an adventurer. Congratulations. I nodded, grateful for the kind words. Now, that was all. Sorry for taking time off your morning. He apologized. I heard those two woke up just before you came here. They are in the barracks if you want to visit. I gave them back their weapons like you asked. I stood up to leave. Right, thanks for that. I approached the door and started to open it. We'll probably leave soon, so I might not have time to say goodbye before then, but it was nice to meet you, Captain. I said with a smile and turned around, only to stop short when I met the wide eyes of and on the other side of the threshold. You're leaving? And asked softly. I almost winced at her tone. Really, if there was someone I wanted to not overhear that conversation, it was her. I sighed and closed the door behind me. Yeah, I'm leaving for Orario soon. I replied, my voice just as soft. I wanted to tell you properly sorry. Was it something I should apologize for? It felt like it, even if there was nothing spoken about what she probably felt for me. Oh, she muttered, before her mouth bloomed into a bright smile. Oh, that's amazing, Shirou. Are you becoming an adventurer? And asked, fiddling with a blue piece of fabric tied to her right wrist. Oh, is that Jonas? Yeah, I joined a familia yesterday, actually. I scratched the back of my head awkwardly. I have been trying to make a goddess consider taking me for a couple of days now, and what happened yesterday seemed to convince her. Ah, that pretty goddess you were with yesterday. Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. Really cool. She babbled, her excited smile then turning into a pout. Oh, what a shame, though. I wanted to hang out with you now that the trouble's gone. The town's a little boring, but there are some really cool places in the forest, you know? I really wanted to show you everything. She finished with a wan smile. That would have been fun, even more so with you. I smiled, thinking of all the amusing comments she would make. Hey, what am I, your jester or something? Rude. Well, if you wanted a job, I just got some money. I joked, drawing a chuckle from her. But, really, sorry for leaving just like that. It sounds like I ruined your plans. Push, that's fine. I guess the bard tales had some truth in them. The hero comes to save the town and then leaves for his next adventure. Her right hand rose and held my own softly. Just try not to forget the damsel you saved here, I won't, I promise. I tilted my head, thinking about it, and would be the first person I truly saved with my own strength. And from now on I would fight with Astria's blessing, so the 4 I saved in this town would be the only ones. If only for that, I'd remember them proudly, but Anne was plenty memorable on her own. Actually, I'm going to leave in 2 days and I plan to buy some stuff tomorrow. Want to accompany me? I could use a guide. 2 days, huh? She asked, her mind seemingly somewhere else. Ah, sorry. It looks like I will be busy today and tomorrow in my mom's shop. She smiled apologetically. But don't worry. I'll be sure to be there to say goodbye. Promise you'll wait for me. I nodded. I tried not to think of the possibility that she was avoiding me now that I tacitly rejected her and just took her word for it. Right, that's a shame. Sorry about that. She then let go of my hand and took a step back. So, now that that's done with, have you seen my brother? That idiot snuck out of home to hang out with his friends here, so I came looking for him. I shook my head, amused at Aaron's antics. No, not really. I just came to talk to the captain. Right, I should probably look for him then, she said, walking backwards, a small smile on her face. See ya, hero. See you later, Anne. I stood there for a little while, hearing the sound of her footsteps fade in the distance, before I shook myself out of my reverie. Right, no use standing around. There are still some things I need to do before I leave. Better I got to it. Ash, I can eat on my own. I don't need help eating porridge of all things. Just shut up and eat. Feeding you it's the least I could do, Atticus. Some muffled voices reached from beyond the door and my shoulders slumped slightly in relief. I knocked on the door and opened it to the sound of a two-tone enter. /enter. Oh, hey, Shirou, good morning. Ash said from her place on a stool near Atticus' bed, a bowl on one hand and a spoon in the other. Ash, nice to see you up and about. You too, Atticus. I greeted the two. It's good to see you too, Shirou. Still not up yet, though, but that's not my decision it seems. The blonde man said with a small smile. Of course not. You would understand if you had seen your state last night. Ash answered with narrowed eyes. They looked fine. Atticus' missing arm notwithstanding, he looked nothing like the mess of bruises he was yesterday. Hell, his twisted hand looked like it had nothing broken anymore. Ash looked a little pale still, but that probably was exhaustion. There were no signs of the wounds she accrued on her rush out of the forest. Amazing. Had this something to do with their blessings? I had Avalon for healing. Maybe they had something like it? You look great, considering. I couldn't help but say. It seems the healer does great work. She does, the Palom said before adding. But it was mostly thanks to the potions we had in reserve for emergencies. We had left a few high-quality ones in our room, just in case. She then shrugged. Slow-acting ones, though, so I couldn't help you yesterday. Sorry, Shirou, for leaving you to clean up our mess. I shook my head. Don't apologize, it was thanks to your warnings that I managed to turn their ambush around and get the upper hand. And what a turnaround that was. The guards told us of what state you left those goblins in. Probably should have sneaked you in the first place. She grumbled, spooning some of the porridge and offering it to the bedridden man. She then grew serious. Still, I need to thank you for saving my companion and for Wrath's weapon. I heard it was your word that had the guards bring it back. Lady Hephaestus will appreciate it. Ash said softly, her eyes far away. Atticus swallowed the food he was eating and nodded, his shoulders squared and his eyes firmly on mine. I thank you as well. I owe you my life, Shirou, and my blade. If there's something I could do to pay you back, say the word and I'll have it done. I smiled awkwardly. Really, there's no need. I began, but when Atticus' eyes narrowed, I remembered the captain's words. I sighed. But if you really want to thank me, then I'll cash in the debt later when I'm in need of a weapon. You both are smiths in Hephaestus Familia, right? A longsword would suffice. I'd probably need a physical one to properly delve into the dungeon. It'd be bad to just depend on my projections. Atticus clenched his fist and looked at Ash, then both nodded. All right. I might have lost an arm, but I'm still a child of Hephaestus. I wanted to slap myself a little for that. Right? Forging might be impossible for him now with only one arm. With Ash's help, I will make you a weapon that will carry my goddess mark with pride. Maybe I could eventually do something about that with Avalon? I don't know if I could heal others with it, but I get the feeling that even if I could, trying to restore a limb now would burn me from the inside out. Better to wait until I get a better read on the changes I received. I could always offer healing to him later when I'm sure of the consequences. Ash nodded again, a determined look on her face. Yeah, I might not have earned the right to use her mark yet, but I will do my best to not disappoint your expectations. She then added, almost whining. You'll have to come to Orario though. I have the feeling we're going to be stuck in assistant duty for a while. That's no problem. I'm going there in a couple of days with Astria. I'll make sure to visit your shop then. Their eyes widened at that. Astria is coming back to Orario. Ash muttered, off filling her voice. So she took you in? Congratulations. Astria's Familia was pretty famous and well regarded before. You know, all of that happened. She finished a little uncomfortably. I didn't. Actually, no. I had some guesses of what had happened to my late senpais, but that was Astria's story to tell, if she ever wanted to. Besides, some part of me preferred to know the girls Astria loved by how they lived their lives, and not by how those lives ended. So I just shrugged, an awkward smile on my face. But, for some reason, there was something niggling in my mind. Something in her expression told me she was referring to something else aside from their passing when she talked about what happened to the Familia. Ash. Atticus barked, his tone chastising. You're being rude. Right, sorry. I didn't mean to bring up uncomfortable stuff when we should be celebrating, she said with a grimace. I'm actually a little envious. I raised an eyebrow. So Astria really did have a fan. HM? Is there something I would need to tell Lady Hephaestus? Should I start looking for a new party member? Wait, no. I didn't mean anything by that. I wouldn't leave our goddess. I grinned at the byplay. You sure? I asked. I could probably ask my goddess if she has a place for you. She'd probably love to have you on board as well. I teased her. Hey, don't gang up on me, you too. See how you get your longsword when I'm not there to help him out. She turned to me, sticking out her tongue. Huh, she looked a lot younger like that. The few times I've seen her, she looked focused, but now her expression fitted her palum childlike appearance. I wonder how old she was. It was hard to tell. I exchanged amused looks with Atticus. Maybe we should apologize. HM, actually, didn't you tell me that you traveled, to Orario to join Astria's Familia in the first place, only to find she wasn't there anymore? Atticus. Maybe in a little while. It was fun not being the teased one for once. I checked one last time the bag I bought with the money I earned from the hobgoblin, making sure I was not forgetting anything important. Clothes, a water skin, and a smaller bag with dry rations we could have on the way. According to Astria, she didn't need to eat, but she could feel hunger, so I made sure to buy some stuff to eat during the trip. I was ready to leave. It wasn't a particularly long trip, if only by this world's standards, and we were hitching a ride on a merchant's carriage who was kind enough to give us a hand. Supposedly, we would be there by night if we kept going after sundown, which he planned to do. Officially, he was using me as a guard, but the roads were supposedly safe this time of the year, so it was only a technicality. And I would have protected the carriage anyway should something, or someone, try to attack us. So, really, in my eyes he was doing it for free. Still, I had some until we had to meet with the merchant. Hell, the sun wasn't out yet. So what now? Normally, I wouldn't want to bother others so early in the morning. But I had noticed that Astria had the same habit as me of waking up before the sun fully rose. Maybe I could share a cup of tea with her while we waited? It was when I was about to make good of that idea that a knocking on my door called my attention. Astria, probably. Huh, it seems great minds think alike. So I was a little surprised when I opened the door and found Anne, her hair in disarray and bags under her eyes. You look awful. Ah crap, my thoughts escaped out of my mouth. And snorted. Good fucking morning to you too, Shirou. It's nice to see you. Ah, yes I missed you too, she said, sarcasm dripping from her tone. Sorry. Just surprised me a little. I scratched my cheek. It's really nice to see you, Anne. I thought I wouldn't get to say goodbye to you. And smiled softly at that. I wouldn't miss it. Now, come on, help me with this. It's damn heavy and I've been carrying it from home. she said, and kicked a wooden trunk lying on the floor next to her. What's this? I asked, kneeling to lift the heavy-looking thing. My stuff, of course. Did you think I'd let you go without me? My eyes widened in shock. I looked up and went deadpan when I saw her Cheshire grin. Haha, did you believe me? Did your hopes go up a little? Sorry, just kidding. I let out an explosive sigh and picked up the trunk. Not as heavy as I thought. So? I asked the tired-looking girl once her and her trunk were in my room, and ignored my question and looked around, curiosity filling her eyes. Never been in a man's room that wasn't my brother's. Looks boring. I raised an eyebrow. You know this is not my room, right? I'm just renting it. Not that my room back in Fuyuki was any more furnished than this. That's true, I guess, she muttered. After a few moments, seemingly content after her intrusion into my private life, and sat on my bed. So, what are you waiting for? Open it up and tell me what you think, she said, pointing at the trunk with her chin. What's this, a lucky bag or something? I muttered under my breath. Wanting to get this over with, I kneeled once again and undid the latches on the side of the trunk. Inside there was armor. Or rather, some pieces of armor and clothing. I lifted the bigger piece of clothing, a dark brown, short-sleeved, leather jerkin with beautiful details embroidered in white thread. The material was reasonably tough, but I was sure that it would be really comfortable once it was broken in. And, what's this? I looked inside of the chest and saw also a long-sleeved woolen tunic, a chest piece made of iron, a pair of leather boots with metal plates, and a pair of fingerless gauntlets. I looked up and met Anne's eyes, her head tilted in confusion at my tone. You don't like it? It's yours. What do you mean, it's mine? I mean, it's amazing, but this looks also expensive. Just the jerkin alone, the hours it must have taken to make it by hand, the beautiful details, the high-quality leather. This was artisan-level work. I don't think I can afford all of this. PFT, why would I demand money for a present, doofus? She answered, amused. She stood up from my bed and approached me, counting with her fingers as she spoke. The jerkin was made by my mom. Told you she has a leather workshop, right? I mean, she already had it done, but she resized it for you. The armor and boots came from the guards, and the tunic is from Aaron. The trunk is from the captain. He said you could keep it too. She grinned at my astonished expression, before reaching into the chest and taking out the 2 leather fingerless gauntlets. And these are from me, she said, suddenly looking shy. I mean, they totally look like crap, but I wanted to make something for you with my own hands. They are the first thing I actually made on my own, to be honest. She smiled bashfully, offering me the gauntlets. I lowered the jerkin back into the chest and took the pieces of equipment like they were fragile. I eyeballed your size, but you can adjust them so they are not as tight, from here and here, so I think they would fit you. And kept babbling on, and I took advantage of the time to inspect the gauntlets. To be honest, for all her insecurities, they looked pretty good. There were some parts where the detail she had wanted to add came a little crooked, but only someone extremely nitpicky would complain about that. I was not nitpicky at all. I loved them. I looked at the girl in front of me and noted once again the bags under her eyes. Did she start working on this the moment she found out I was leaving? How many hours did she spend making this present for me? How could I do anything else but accept them after realizing that? I waited for a little more until she seemed to run out of steam. And, really, they're great. I'll treasure them. I'd rather you use them, idiot. I know the dungeon is dangerous, so I wanted to give you something to protect you. She then grinned. Now, come on, try it all on. I'll help you. And stood up and grabbed the tunic. This goes first, under the jerkin. Should I? I began to ask, pointing at the blue tunic shirt I was wearing. Removing the stains from my trusty t-shirt had been impossible, so I had to change for something new. Now it laid at the bottom of my new bag, a memento of my old world. If I ever wanted to wear it, though, I could always trace it, but depending on magic-made clothes had begun to grate on me. Yes. You totally need to. It would be too hot otherwise. And replied, her eyes darting everywhere but to me. It's sheep wool, you know. And with the jerkin over it, you'd cook alive. She added a nod for emphasis. Right. I side-eyed the girl as I began to remove my shirt. It did look warm. Of course, as soon as it went over my stomach, I could feel Anne's eyes devouring the sight. This girl. I threw the shirt on the bed and crossed my arms. Anne? The tunic, I said, once it became apparent that she was in her own world, her eyes tracing my exposed body up and down. Hey, you got a good look at mine. I get a good look at yours. It's only fair. And shrugged, before tilting her head. Hey, is it me, or you got more toned? A little. Benefits of receiving a fauna, I guess. It wasn't a big change. I just recovered the small amount of musculature I lost after skipping training since I've begun living here and gained a little more. I flexed an arm and felt the supernatural strength it had. Then again, even if the difference wasn't as noticeable, I felt stronger than ever before. I heard the sound of and swallowing and looked back to see her eyes stuck on my arm, heat gathering on her cheeks. Okay, that's enough of that. I took the tunic from her hands and promptly put it on. Hey, I was watching that. Really? I asked sarcastically once my head came out of the tunic. I really didn't notice. Maybe you weren't being obvious enough? I heard a humph come from her as she kneeled back to the chest. Oh, it's really warm. I had bought a couple of tunics with the money I got from the hob, but I feel this is the only one that will be useful during winter. Maybe I wasted my money. It was a little big on me, but I hopefully still had some growing left. I looked back to Anne, who was still pouting, and extended my hand for her to hand me the jerkin she was now hugging to her chest. Nope, I'll help you with this. Have to check the straps and see if the jerkin fits you well, she said, her nose up in the air imperiously. I eyed her with suspicion, but she didn't budge. She helped me pass one arm through the sleeve and then the other, and then she started adjusting the straps that were used to close the whole thing, a focused expression on her face. She tugged and pulled and latched them to the other side, then unlatched and pulled again, until she deemed them acceptable. Huh, she's really checking stuff properly. Feel a little bad for assuming. She was checking something on the collar when our eyes met, and she stopped. Anne? I asked, and her eyes flitted to my mouth and back to my eyes. Her hands moved again, this time caressing their way back to the back of my neck, meeting in the middle. I froze. I inhaled deeply when she took a step forward and pressed her soft chest to mine, and tried to take a step back, but she was glued to me. You know? I didn't come here to do this, not really. I mean, I imagined it for sure, but actually doing it? It wasn't in my plans. She whispered, her warm breath touching my lips, before she suddenly closed the distance and kissed me. MMH, and you know I'm leaving. We shouldn't. I tried to reason when our lips separated, but my breath hitched for a second, when it pressed her breasts even more to my chest, molding her body to mine. Why not? Yeah, you're leaving, but that doesn't mean we can't fool around. Why don't you like this? Am I too ugly for you to kiss? She asked with a cheeky smirk. That's not impitch. She interrupted my words with another kiss. I took another step back. She followed, that's not what I meant, and you know it. I repeated, my heart beating like a drum. You're beautiful, but we hardly know each other. MH. Could you stop that for a second? I complained when she kept interrupting me. I'm not asking you to fuck me, moi. I'm not such an easy lay perv. And gods know how little I need a kid now. Chim, but a little making out should be fine, right? MMPH, just two friends having fun. She intercalated every few words with another kiss, her soft lips meeting mine again and again, each time a little longer. And each time I felt like I was in conflict with myself. I shouldn't do this, the more rational part of me said, but I didn't stop her, not really. My mind was growing hazier, not because of lack of oxygen or something like that, but due to lust. Would it be so bad to indulge a little? She knew I was leaving and she didn't care. It would only be a moment of weakness, of relief. A little making out, she said. If you were so much against this, then fucking push me away, Shirou. I'm a big girl. I won't cry if you say no. You're strong enough to stop me. She grumbled, and then started to pepper my chin and cheeks with pecks. But you are just throwing out excuses, aren't you? You want this too. She muttered heatedly. Anne. I breathed out her name in the small window of time between kisses and she shuddered, her green eyes growing misty with desire. Unwittingly, my arms circled around her body and hugged her waist, pressing her tighter to my body. I looked down, my eyes dark with hunger, and smiled brightly, a flush of excitement covering her face and going down the neck of her dress, covering her chest with a fetching red color. She closed the distance again. I could have avoided it. Maybe I should have avoided it. But, fuck it. I covered the distance before she could, my lips finding hers in the middle and meeting with abandon. Moi, you don't know how much I've been wanting to do this, MH. And didn't seem to mind when her words were the ones being interrupted, as she kissed me back fervently each time. Since I've met you, every day I couldn't help but imagine this. She breathed and her hands started to wander their way back down my neck and to my chest, burning their way to my stomach. You think I didn't notice, with how much you ogled me? You weren't even pretending to be subtle. And you called me a perv? I rasped, shuddering when her hands sneaked up my tunic, caressing my abs with soft fingers. I might be fucking dense sometimes, but this girl was hitting me on the head with her wants, and chuckled throatily, her lips leaving mine and kissing their way down. I groaned when she started nipping on the side of my neck. Can you blame me when you show my virgin eyes such a thing? I should thank your goddess for the sight. My arms tightened their hold on her tight waist and brought her flesh against me. I brought my face down, burying my nose in her hair and breathing in her heady, musky scent. You can touch me too, you know? And whispered, and I felt one of her hands leave my body to grab one of my arms on her waist. I let her move it downwards until my hand was cupping her ass over the dress. I won't break. The fabric was thick. It had to be due to the cold, but even so I could feel my fingers sink into the softness of her butt. My other hand joined, and then I lost myself in the sensation of her ass changing shape under my touch. Fuck, I'm so fucking wet for you. And breathed into my neck, returning to her kissing while mewling every time my fingers dig into her softness. Her touch under my tunic became even more frantic, to the point where she started to raise the fabric to gain better access. And then she just wanted to remove it. We can't, I replied huskily, my stubbornness the only thing stopping me from following her lead, ripping her dress off her body and making love to her until I was satisfied. This time it was one of my hands that left its place and grabbed one of hers, stopping it cold. Clothes stay on. And whined, but then nodded against my neck. Sorry, got a little too heated for a second, she said between ragged breaths. Seems like both of us will leave this room unsatisfied. And then she grinded her hips against mine, making me all too aware of the hardness between my legs. Did that grow bigger because of your blessing as well? Or are you just happy to see me? She giggled. I almost groaned at her stupid joke. I shook my head, dismissing the idiotic thought. Luckily, the silliness seemed to do the trick as the mood was a lot less intoxicating. Anne's hands left my abdomen and went back to circle my neck. I tilted my head when Anne just smiled up at me almost innocently, if not for how red and swollen her lips looked, and the deep blush covering her face. I tried to not look further down, but we were close enough that I could feel two hard points touching my chest. It seems bras were not a thing here, or maybe Anne didn't use them. HM? Did you get your fill in? I asked half-jokingly. Never, she declared seriously, before chuckling a little. I think that if I started touching again, I wouldn't stop. I'm fucking burning here, Shirou. Don't tempt me. She whined at the end when I pressed her a little more tightly against me. Sorry, you're just so warm, I muttered, a little embarrassment coming back now that I was calming down. It's not like I minded. But if you keep up with this, I won't let you go, you know? She said softly and kissed me again, this time a lot more calmly, before burying her face in the crook of my neck. Would it be so bad, though, to stay here with me? She asked, her voice choking up a little at the end. Guilt bubbled up from my stomach. My words would hurt her, I knew, but there was only one way this was going to end. It's not you, not really, I began, saying the most cliché line in the world. It was true, however. This life, this place, it's not for me. Maybe I would have grown to like it here eventually, especially by your side. But this is not the path I chose for myself. I had a promise to keep, an utopia to pursue, and I wouldn't stop here. I made promises to a lot of people, including myself. I can't stay. And fell silent for a moment before I felt her nod. Slowly, one of her hands rose and cupped my cheek. She looked up and smiled. Maybe in another life then, she muttered, closing the distance between us and pressing her forehead to mine, her eyes closing as she did so. Maybe in another life, I repeated, closing my eyes and placing my hand on hers. We stood like that for a while, not saying anything, until the rising sun reminded us that time still existed, and that I needed to leave. Still silent, and closed the jerkin tightly with careful fingers, and then helped me put on the gauntlets she made for me. A perfect fit, they turned out to be. She grabbed one of my hands with both of hers and smiled. I'm going to keep practicing and getting better, so when you need a replacement for these, you better come here or I'll get pissed. We'll see each other again then. I smiled back, and eyed me dubiously, before untying the blue handkerchief she had on her wrist. She reached out and tied it on my upper right arm. So you remember. That is our promise, so don't you dare lose it, okay? And, are you sure? Isn't this? Jonas. But I prefer him going with you, so he can take care of you in my place. I caressed the fabric, remembering for a moment the dog I couldn't save. Then I nodded. Okay, I'll take care of it until I'm strong enough to not need his protection, then I'll return it to you. She nodded back and that was that. I closed the trunk, deciding to forego wearing the chest plate and armored boots for now, and we left the room together after freshening up a bit. So, I'm going to sleep for a couple of days if you don't mind. I hope my farewell present was enough for you to forgive me for not being around yesterday, she said with a cheeky smile. Don't worry, it was. Rest well and thank you. PFT, thank you, hero. Now, if you're ever nearby, don't be a stranger. Maybe we can continue where we left off. She winked and left with a jaunty wave. Bye-bye, Shirou. Bye, Anne. I waved back with an exasperated smile as she went down the stairs. I stood alone in the hallway for a little while after that, thinking. I wouldn't regret the choice I made today, but it would be a lie to say that my mind didn't wander into that maybe I could have had. It wouldn't have been a bad life, I felt. I went downstairs to wait for Astria, only to find her enjoying her breakfast already. Ah, Shirou. Good morning. I was about to go fetch you after I saw your friend leave, she said, her eyes focused on my new acquisitions. My, don't you look dashing? Do I? I asked dubiously. I mean, the presents were amazing, but I knew I was a pretty plain guy. And delivered some stuff for me, a present from her family and some of the guards. You're starting to look like a proper adventurer. She then tilted her head, and her expression turned a little amused. Seeing the girl leaving the inn, I was about to ask if you were a proper gentleman to her, but I guess I should have worried about you instead, huh? I felt myself flush a little at the reminder of my less than proper goodbye but then I grew confused. Huh? What do you dash? I started to ask but trailed off when I saw where Astria's eyes were looking at. My neck. My neck that and had just kissed, nibbled and sucked with abandon. My hand flew to the place she was looking at and found swollen, sensitive skin with my fingers. I thought I had enhanced endurance? Then how could she leave a damn hickey? Or multiple, if what my fingers felt was correct. I felt my face burn with embarrassment when I looked back at Astria, who was now smiling innocently at me. Nothing happened. No, that's obviously a lie. I rushed to explain. However, we didn't let it get out of hand, and I properly explained I was going to leave. It was just a farewell. Oh, I'm not chastising you, Shirou. I might be the goddess of purity, but I won't forbid you from enjoying earthly pleasures, she said, shrugging almost uncaringly. As long as you do it in moderation and aren't taking undue advantage of someone else, you can indulge as you want. Astria finished, the barest of blushes on her face. She seemed used to having this conversation, but I guess that after being with her other children for years, this kind of thing might have popped out. Okay. I'll be careful so I don't disappoint you. Or myself. Sex for sex's sake didn't appeal to me, to be honest, and I wasn't exactly searching for a relationship right now, not with the memory of Saber still fresh on my mind, so I wouldn't worry about overindulging as it were. Maybe in the future, though. I wouldn't deny myself love and all it entailed if I ever found it again. Saber wouldn't want me to wallow in her memory all my life. Or maybe that's an excuse I'm using so I don't feel as guilty for what I just did with, and so soon after I lost Artoria. I know you won't. Astria nodded, a pleased look on her face. Now that that's out of the way, please, sit down and enjoy some breakfast. Our carriage to Orario is leaving soon. I sat with my goddess and enjoyed my last breakfast in Westmount, eager for the new chapter in my life to start.